Yes, stay tuned here to the Spacebook channel. Welcome back. It's time for Type 40 Live, your live stream Doctor Who show, materializing here again on the Spacebook channel. Whatever time zone or time stream you're joining us from, whatever decade even tonight, welcome. Yes, this is Type 40 Live, hitting your screens, your view screens in real time for content, conversation, and this time celebration here on YouTube and Facebook. Yeah, we're in front of a live chat full of friends, fans, and companions just like you. And now, of course, we're in podcast form too. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you've tugged on something fruity, something fruity and colourful, and maybe mixed up a cocktail or two, because I'd like to think that's what he would have wanted. And by him, of course, I mean the birthday boy himself, JNT. We're going to get into him in a moment. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks, and you are, we've got a live chat filling up very, very nicely. We'll find out who you all are in a moment, but I can see some familiars welcoming us back. Yes, we're back at it, back on, and back in for more of the same. Back from our half-term break. Can't wait to get started. It's good to see you all here. I'm going to bring on the team now because they can't wait to get into this either. Let's see if they've bought I think it's customary, isn't it, when you're at a birthday party, when you've been invited to a party, you bring an LP, don't you? Bring an album. Have you brought anything in, David Diaz? What's in the mega playlist?
Nothing. I haven't brought anything apart from my Type 40 mug, of course.
That's it. That's always something worth getting your lips round in the Type 40 Live mug. Welcome back, mate. Good to see you. And who else is here? Yeah, it's filling up nicely. We have, I'm not sure what this is. JT's back too.
Save the TARDIS! Save the TARDIS! Hello, everybody!
Very, very 1985. TARDIS.
That's right. That's the glasses from Back to the Future 2, and what Dan's wearing is Back to the Future 1. So there you go.
Very, very cool.
That's what today's all about.
That's us sorted. How about these? Simon Horton's back, everybody. You can stop messaging me. He is back. He's back on the reservation, and yes, he's got glasses on too. Look.
Well, absolutely. You see,
it's so out of place.
I'm a Pet Shop Boys fan, and that was me in the 80s. Was Pet Shop Boys. So I'm rocking the Chris Lowe look tonight.
Chris
Lowe, it's fantastic. I haven't done one of these for about a month, 5-6 weeks, something ridiculous like that, because I was off having a life for a couple of weeks at least.
Dare you
don't want to do any of that. Yes, he's back, and so is that starry-eyed girl, Sarah Graham. She's here too.
Hello, everybody.
Where's your shades?
I don't got my shades, but I have got the JNT play suit.
You have. That's spectacular. Yeah, very, very good. He would definitely approve. And the same, in fact, I think we need a close look at JT's as well, don't we?
Yeah.
Loving the Hawaiian shirt.
Guns out, He'd be thrilled. He'd be thrilled with that. And we're not. Where's he? What's he wearing? It's Mighty Matt Pot as well, coming in from Tasmania.
Hey, hi, how are we all today?
Hello, Matt.
Hello, mate.
What the hell? Cool. You can't even see him.
Rest for winter.
Are you in there? Are you actually in there?
That's preferable, isn't it?
You look like you're hiding out somewhere.
I am in winter. I've got the heater on and everything. It's freezing.
Oh my god!
Gosh, are you kidding?
Bermuda shorts here in the UK right now are essential. They are so it so ties in with it because we are having a Bermuda type summer here. It's wonderful.
Definitely.
It's so funny watching you guys actually going on about it being so hot. And I'm freezing. So
we haven't had a good summer since 2006. So this is, we've waited a long time for this.
Yeah, this is me.
We've got every right to crow about it here in the console room. But yeah, this is the latest of our event shows. We do these now and again, don't we? Where we sort of clear the decks and devote the entire show to one topic. more or less. Although we do have Merchandise Paradise coming up later on. That'll be something to sort of break it up a little. But other than that, it's all 80s, all JNT, and you can get into the spirit of it too if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook in our live chat. Should we go and see whether they're in the spirit of things already? Who's here and what have they got to say? Tony L says hi, everyone.
Hey,
Tony.
Hi.
Heather Sulu says hello to my Whooniverse buddies.
Hello.
We've got John Bradshaw here too. He says, I am back in the UK for a holiday. And it's just like another warm day coming back from Singapore. Well, welcome back.
That's actually, I've been to Singapore, and this is very much like Singapore.
Wow.
Oh, I couldn't live there. I couldn't do this all year
blue
round.
skies.
No.
People, lots of people comparing temperatures, not comparing fashion for a change. Hi, Matt. Hi, Carol. JWC reviews. They're all here. Good to see you all. Mr. Will Hadcroft's here too. The writer, Will Hadcroft, there from the Resurrection Plant, available now from BBC Audio, isn't it?
It is, yes. And we covered it, Will, a few weeks ago on Merchandise Paradise. Go back and have a look.
Hi, Wendy.
Got lots of these. Welcome back.
Well, you're
Welcome
popular,
back,
Matt,
Simon.
aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Everybody loves me.
And Wendy here from the Department of Wendology. She approves of the dress code too, so we must be doing something right.
Yeah.
And I know that Shah from Geek Rambles is here somewhere. Have you got the link, Shah? She must be running late. So it's all filling up. Lovely to see you all. Keep the comments coming. Yeah, we are going full on 80s this time, and in honor of the big man, the gaffer, the bloke who was there steering the ship. Now, this is the man who produced more classic Doctor Who than anybody else. John Nathan Turner. JNT was an undeniably controversial creative force. I suppose that his sheer dogged determination and dedication, not just to the show but to us, the audience, is as next to legendary as anything that was on screen. But during his time in that role, in the big chair, he kind of veered from one extreme to the other in terms of popularity among the fans, didn't he? It was all quite notorious within the industry. JNT made waves, made enemies. But tonight we focus on the fact that he made 9 seasons of Doctor Who, cast three doctors and umpteen companions, and these combinations of characters and those stories, they made plenty of childhoods, including mine. So after all these decades, I think I'm noticing that with every season that he produced, guys, making it to the Blu-ray collection that we get from BBC Studios, I noticed that the phrase that I see coming up a lot is sort of reappraisal. And some of us here on the panel have met him. Some of us knew him quite well. And we're going to share some of those stories and put on a bit of a party. And I like to think, JT, that he would approve.
Oh, he'd love it. Any excuse for a party, and that man was there.
The louder and more raucous, the better, basically.
And of course, it's not just about us on screen. It's not just about us on screen. It's about you guys in the live chat too. So if you met JNT, by all means, tell us about it. If you grew up in the 80s and all those stories meant the world to you, tell us about that too. Or if you've come to them later on BritBox or through the Blu-rays or whatever, let us know what you think of the gold and about his legend. Ask us about some of those stories. Are they true? Because there's a lot of legends about this man. He has, I think he's got a mystique about him still, Simon. There's some, considering his taste in dress, that's no mean feat, is it?
No, it's funny, really. It's a bit of a dichotomy because, of course, John Nathan Turner was undoubtedly... Sorry, that's my new dog. I do apologise. Who only arrived yesterday, so I'm really sorry. If this is little Lenny, named after Lenny from what's the science fiction comedy show?
Big Wolf, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
No,
Doctor Who.
Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory. That's where his name from. He's a little rescue dog. Sorry, Lenny. Sorry about that. But no, what I was going to say was it is odd because John Nathan Turner was undoubtedly the most public Doctor Who producer at that point. And nobody, the public didn't know what a Doctor Who producer was, let alone who one was. And so JNT came along, and suddenly everybody knew what a producer was. And yet we still know so little about the man, actually, ironically. I'm going to have to get...
It's strange that you say that, because you knew him personally, didn't you?
Sorry. Yes, I did. Same as JT. I knew John personally. I mean, I can't claim to be, best mates or anything like that with him, of course. But yes, I grew to know him well, and we would go out. On the town in Birmingham because I'm a Birmingham boy, same as you, Dan. Josh Len. And the same as John Nathan Turner was born in Birmingham, which we'll talk about later. And so we would go out on the town in his hometown. So it was brilliant to know him. I'm going to get rid of the dog.
Just go.
Somewhat drastic. So we've got people are sharing their memories. People are sharing their memories too. So the idea is that we're gonna talk about the content. We're going to talk about what was on screen as well as what was off. All these doctors that you brought us. Cast 3 doctors. I think it's even in the new era. That's a lot of doctors, and of course everybody's got their favourite. And there's JNT stretching pretty much throughout an entire decade, steering the ship that entire time, suffering all the slings and arrows. Matt, was JNT somebody that you were aware of when you were growing up?
Absolutely not. However, as soon as I actually saw it was one of those documentaries. I think it was 30 Years in the TARDIS, or one of those ones that he did. It was like an interview that was done after the show had finished, and I got to see him, and I was like, "Wow, that's a flamboyant fellow." And he I think he was talking about Colin Baker at the time and his tenure, and I was just like, "Wow, he's really got his own personality, hasn't he?" Which is something that was very rare at the time for producers,
Well, that was what I was saying. It just was odd that he became so well known to the public. I mean, he would appear on Blue Peter, for goodness sakes. When did that happen? Really, with not just with Doctor Who, but with any TV show at that time. I can't think of any other producer, particularly, that would have appeared on television in this sort of a promotional capacity, an interview, for example. So he put himself out there, all for the good of the show, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, John was way ahead of his time. John was what they would now call a showrunner.
Yeah.
So he did all the important stuff like producing the show and looking at the budgets and having sleepless nights over the lack of money, etc., having to deal with the 6th floor, the infamous 6th floor. But he was out there doing what has actually been the template for those that have come after him, if you know what I mean. And by that, I mean RTD and Moffat. He was the original British showrunner. He was a breakthrough guy at the BBC as well. No other producer was really like John. There were some that came after him, really, who were slightly younger than him, who would have broken the mold had they been given more of a chance. But John was the one that was absolutely, I know how this show would be, and this is how it should go.
Well, when I didn't work for the BBC, but I worked for a company that worked for the BBC. And when I was doing the graphics at Top of the Pops, I saw him downstairs in the studio. He was just walking around. Somebody was showing him around, but I was told there and then that he's the only man. He was the only man that took the job. Nobody wanted the job.
Yeah,
because in those days, Doctor Who was considered a blight to the BBC. Yeah. So every time he tried to get rid of him or try to replace him, they couldn't find anyone to replace him. No, so he was stuck with the job, basically. But I saw him from afar. I'd never met him, but anyway,
there was somebody. But again, but that's another story for another time. But John had made Doctor Who in such a beastie, and hadn't he? It was so big. It had become this big machine, and as I say, that was the template for everything that's come since. But at the time, nobody in the BBC really understood what John had done. And what John did was made Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat's job so much easier.
Yeah,
and I think
also,
it chimes too with what Simon says quite a lot of the time, Ian, that the BBC have never really understood Doctor Who.
They didn't care.
Whether it's been successful or not. They've never really understood why or when things change. They just sort of seem to follow on behind it and reap the dividends when it's doing well.
What I learned though through talking through people, and obviously in those days, I was into Doctor Who. What I was told was that he basically came up with all these great ideas how to promote Doctor Who, and yet no one was listening. No one would listen to him, and he just went out of his way and did it anyway. And then a lot of things came towards Doctor because of what he did, but the BBC wouldn't acknowledge what he was doing ever. They hated him apparently. So I don't know if that's true.
Some of them seem to dread him walking down the corridor, but I think for as many people that you will find like that, and that's probably quite common if you're determined to make a mark.
Yeah.
For as many people there are like that, there are lots of people who would sing his praises for the various things that he,
I'm getting flashback.
he did. I mean, I don't think it's dabbing him with faint praise, really, to say that he was the right man for the right age for the 1980s. The 80s. The 80s was a time. Now we're used to the multimedia age and the streaming age now that's all coming along, and everything seems to move so quickly. But the entertainment landscape, as we were going into the 80s, that was seeing in relative terms enormous changes too. Just in the UK, we'd got the arrival of breakfast TV, then daytime TV, and things were getting sort of broken down, and regulations were changing. When John took over the series, it was seen as not quite a warhorse, I think, Simon, but certainly a mainstay, and it was sort of nestled into its little nook in the schedule. But I think that John was able to see that a complacency was there at the BBC. This is no reflection on Graham Williams, but with the people who were making it, the people who were starring in it, and maybe that was coming in with the audience too. So I think he, at the start of that new decade, I think the way he was looking at it was this was his opportunity to seize, looking all around him at the pop culture landscape, literally everything, taking it all in and being aware of what the audience would want, not now, but maybe next.
Yeah, and the thing is, some of the decisions and choices he made are at minimum controversial, but he was never anything other than brave and prepared to try this stuff out, and also, let's not forget that actually he was very much an untried producer. He wasn't a producer when he became Doctor Who. He wasn't a producer. He was given the job of being a producer when he became producer on Doctor Who. He hadn't done it at that point. And so he was the same as Verity Lambert in that case, in that respect. The BBC, I was going to say the BBC trusted him to do the role. Actually, it comes back, I think, more to what we were just saying about, which is actually the BBC didn't know what they got with the show. They were nervous of it, and to a large extent they were just like, just anybody that wants to do it, for goodness sakes, just give it to them and just hope for the best. So I don't think it was any through any sort of visionary idea that we'll give this untested guy a chance to see if he sails. No, it was more a case of we're not going to lose one of our best guys if it sinks. So fine, give it to this young upstart, because that's what he was. He was very much a young upstart. He had big ideas. He was enthusiastic. He wanted to go places, and he wanted.
Do you think that as well? People like John coming through. It's no coincidence that was happening at the time that sort of Channel 4 was about to be established, and the whole. I mean, in America, we'd got the MTV was about to be launched, and all that kind of thing was going to happen. But we were all, I think, as a nation, we were becoming more media aware. More, it's like that video killed the radio star kind of feel, JT.
Yeah. I mean, actually, you're right. We were becoming more media savvy, and for example, much as I love Philip Hinchcliffe and the Philip Hinchcliffe era, actually, he would have been completely wrong to be running Doctor Who in the 80s, I think, because JT says John Nathan Turner was very much ahead of his time, and he was absolutely perfectly right to be running the show at the exact moment that all these clips that you're currently playing on screen are playing out. Because
it all fits, doesn't it?
It does fit. He hit the zeitgeist, and so he's not responsible for creating this zeitgeist, but he was there at the right moment, and he was the right person to have there at the right moment. And the BBC pretty much picked him by accident. He just happens to be the perfect choice, I think, for that moment in time.
Well, he was determined, wasn't he?
Sorry,
go ahead, Jay. I think he was determined to make Doctor Who a hit.
Yeah,
he really was. Nobody cared.
It wasn't just a case of making it a hit. He had been on the show for years in various capacities. He you know, once you started in the BBC in the old days, you could be there to retirement. As we all know, and that's now gone, sadly. But you know, you were trained and you were apprenticed and you worked your way up, and that's exactly what John did in the old style that we used to do. But he had very much a vision of how he wanted to do how Doctor Who should be and how it should be brought into modern day television for a 1980s audience. And you can see that right from the opening segment of Leisure Hive. You know, from the moment the opening titles hit, you're bang, you're now in 1980. No question about it. And this is a brand new, fresh Doctor Who. And of course, the BBC loved him for several years. When they shifted it because of the style of the show, they shifted it to twice weekly for Peter Davison's era because they loved the fact that John wanted Peter, the golden boy of the time, especially on BBC television. They shifted it to twice a week. The ratings soared. You know, people were watching it. People were talking about Doctor Who. You can look at those stories now that were Peter's stories, and you can see why people were watching it. Not just fans. I'm talking the United Kingdom public as well. It was a success, and they loved him for that period.
Sarah, you were born in the 80s, so when you look at the Doctor Who stories that John Nathan Turner produced, all that content, and you look back at it in context to the 90s, it's different for us, those of us that grew up watching it then, whether we were little children then or older children. It's part of our own sort of timeline. But when you go back to it, does it seem to you sort of really linked and totally sort of knitted into the tapestry of the 1980s, or does Doctor Who sit as an oddity there?
No, not really. I think I just kind of, you take this stuff for granted with RTD because, you know, as a new fan, I was kind of spoiled, and it's only looking back that you realise just, you know, how amazing JT was, you know, in that regard with the promotion and everything. And, you know, you can't imagine, you know, every movie, every TV show now, they've got a press junket, they do the cycle of certain shows, and, you know, we all know the producers are, directors are. So at the time, it would have seemed, you know, like revolutionary. Some of the stuff on screen I do remember, but again, because obviously all I've known is this media, you know, I grew up, MTV was already established, you know, music videos were, you know, part of the core for me. So, you know, it's
I mean, the truth of the matter is, Sarah, that nobody releases remastered Blu-ray season box sets of Bob's Full House, do they?
Well, no,
They should do.
It's only
if it's out, I'll get it.
I would buy
yeah,
that.
but I think that, and also because not just the content themselves, there's sort of like, I don't know, like subculture of we need to know all the inner workings. I mean, you know, you usually get that with fans and geeks in it, but the fact that they've taken a life of their own, we've got the behind the sofa featurettes, we've got the alternative versions with the updated effects, and it's like all the interviews, the adverts, you know, things at the time, and it's just, we always want more, and it's just brilliant to get your teeth into it, especially if you weren't around at the time, because you can just absorb everything. I really envious.
Well, I mean, I have to say, and there, I'm looking at the comments going through the chats, that the 80s were the best, and gosh, they absolutely were. I mean, everybody knows that, and watches the show knows I'm an absolute 80s geek. I stopped growing in about 1985. Really, I just end there. I'm quite happy in my little 1980s bubble, thank you, because they were the very best of days, and so that's why John Nathan Turner was there, right on the cusp of all of that, because you know, Sarah, there just was this sort of explosion in the 80s. I think maybe part of it was because we kind of thought, well, we should be coming into some new era. It felt like the 1980s felt like future somehow, didn't it, JT?
It did. Well, we were coming out of the Brown
Yes.
1970s, and because we were all getting into that period where we're all turning into teenagers and beyond, we suddenly had television presenters that were living in sin, for crying out loud. And everything was vibrant and colorful.
Yeah.
So the contrast between the dull, very brown 1970s to a very vibrant, electric, Duran Duran infested 1980s.
As well.
Fabulous. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the music at the time, that music is huge. It's back again now. On my radio show, I play a lot of 80s stuff because it sounds amazing, because that was the beginning of the electronic era. And John was very much in tune with all of this. He may not have approved of some stuff, he may not have thought, oh, that's not for me, but he was in tune with it all. And, from the radiophonic workshop onwards, he wanted a glossy effect to Doctor Who. And, he also introduced things like working properly with Doctor Who Monthly, as it was back then, with Marvel. He had worked properly with BBC Enterprises, which is now BBC Studios, the home of Doctor Who.
You would see his name pop up as consultant on things, wouldn't you? He was, I don't think he ever pushed himself ahead of his cast. I think he did know his place, but I think he was also very aware that ultimately the book did stop with him, and that if he could be sort of front facing in some way, then the cast would probably reward that with loyalty to him. If he was also being seen to be loyal to the brand, I think he was very aware. I think he was aware of what he could do for the show, but I don't think it's wrong that he was aware of what the show could potentially do for him and do for his career, and that's why when it came to the point when he took it over, he'd probably been. I never asked him about this myself. Maybe one of you guys did, but it seemed to me that perhaps he'd assembled a little list over the 2 years before he took the job. If I took over, I'd change the music.
Well, he definitely had that. He said that in interviews, Dan, that he had this idea of what he would do. It's interesting that you use the word brand, because that's John. John saw that had never been associated with Doctor Who before John came along, and he saw it as a brand. That's why he did all the things he did. When it was off air, it was John that kept the videos going with the years tapes. That was John. And it was John that always made the actors involved. That was John. And it was John that laid the foundations for fandom across the world, which, as I say, when the show eventually came back in 2004 for 2005, John had laid those foundations because the likes of Russell knew there was a fan base there that could be exploited. And actually, these days we say that, Stephen Moffat had broke America and Matt Smith broke America. Actually, it was John. And yes, it may have only have been a very small amount there, but he built that foundation. And I'll always say that was John across the world, and everybody else just piled on top of it from 2005 onwards.
We've had several comments in the live chat from people who've saying along the line, this is when Doctor Who went synth. Paul Murray says, I was 14 in 1980. I love 80s Who. So even though he was getting into his teens there and potentially he'd seen what's alleged to be the golden era, he obviously still found a lot to enjoy in the 1980s. And lots of people reminiscing over the 80s in general here. Vanessa Law says, I didn't get into Doctor Who until the 80s. See, it was, for me, it was kind of out of my range until the 1980s. I couldn't get hold of old stories then, and it was that simple.
All in a paper bag, a brown paper bag.
Was it John's idea to do the? Sorry, Simon.
No, you carry on, Sarah. Sorry.
Was it John's idea to do that 5 faces of Doctor Who ready for this?
And that's what I was just about to say. We've also JT's touched on the whole branding thing that John brought to it. But yeah, you're right, Sarah. He also brought repeat seasons like 5 Faces. We had John to thank for showing out of Doctor repeats. So he was very much over the entire show. It wasn't just the day-to-day job that Graham Williams and Philip Hinchcliffe and even Barry Letts have been doing. He created the Doctor Who brand, and that's why you then started to see through the 80s. You see this coherence coming out within the merchandise that you.
Vanessa Law also says that he was in charge when the shows were first sold over to the PBS.
Yes,
so those PBS channels over in the States to really, again, to be seen, to be visible over there. We've got lots of people in the chat there. It's lovely to see. So if you are here already enjoying the show, please like the video now. You're having so much fun. You've probably forgotten. We've got a lot of people watching. Please like the video now. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That really does help. And hit the bell, hit the cloister bell, because we are back from our little half-term break. So hit the cloister bell so you get all the notifications about what's coming next. More live streams, more podcasts, more extra videos, and whatever else we can cook up. We can cook up here. And well, we do it. Why do we do it all? We do it all for the same reason that JNT did, for the love of Doctor Who. That's what brings us together every single time we do this, and why we have these conversations with you guys too. So keep those messages coming in the chat. Love to see your memories, and we want some more. So yes, stay tuned. We're going to get some mileage out of that. Stay tuned, because there's lots coming up. Lots coming up on the show, everybody. Where's my little stinger? Where's that gone? It's here.
I'm always worried when he can't find his stinger.
Yes, and we are joined. I'm happy to say that we are joined by another panelist as well. It's an old friend of ours, back on the show after a little while. It's a friend of JNT's and colleague and writer, producer, and the guy behind K9 Official here. Welcome back to Type 40 Live, Paul Tams.
Woohoo!
Hi,
Good to see you, Paul.
Embracing the grey these days.
Go for it. Own it, mate. Own it. Own it. You look like you're calling from Abbey Road. Where are you?
Well, not quite Abbey Road, but no, this is new office at home. So
awesome.
I'm working a lot from home these days.
So you got those gold discs on eBay then, is that right?
They're my awards.
Sorry.
Well, welcome back.
Which was, funnily enough, the art department at on the K9 series.
That's brilliant.
There was only two of these made, one for me and one for Bob, and they said we're going to call them Barkers, and of course the word Barkers is like memories flooded back.
JNT word, isn't it?
Who actually coined that phrase in the first place?
Yeah.
But no, it was obviously a word, play on the BAFTA name and everything. Just in the middle of doing the series, Bob flew back to get a BAFTA for Matter of Loaf and Death. Yeah.
So, have you got lots of fond memories of the 80s, Paul? Or do you remember any of it?
Yes, I remember all of it. I mean, I joined the BBC in '79, and I didn't meet Nathan Turner until which is what everyone called him, until about, I think, obviously knew of him, but not until about going into 81, because there was a family connections situation going on.
Yes.
Because my other half at the time, who I was with for 25 years, was actually John's doctor.
Oh, wow.
It's chronicled in some seedy book that's been out.
Oh, I know the one. Yeah.
Which I think's been toned down since I think they found out that somebody that gave all the filth stories was basically a psychotic idiot who just made it all up.
That's Richard Marston's book, Totally Tasteless, isn't it? I think it's they have put out revised editions of that. Yeah. I understand. Well, let's take a look back in time now. I think because just like all the on-screen legends, JNT had a journey to the TARDIS, didn't he? And I know of one trusty tome that will tell us, Simon, all that we need to know to inspire maybe future TV producers out there and to satisfy the curiosity of us old fans and maybe put it all together. I'm talking, of course, about the Doctor Who diary.
You're going to love this, Paul. Hang on.
Simon
Oui.
all highlighted, and we're going to dip into the pages. We're going to dip into the pages now. Yes, here we are, Simon. So you've been digging in. What have you found out about JNT then? Any good more?
So this week's diary this week's star is just dedicated totally to a little bit of background about John Nathan Turner. This is interesting for Dan and I, at least, because so much of John Nathan Turner's early life was spent in Birmingham, in and around Birmingham in the West Midlands, where Dan and I just both happened to be located. So this is very familiar to you and I, Dan. John was born as John Turner on the 12th of August 1947 on the Perry Common Road in Erdington, which is in Birmingham. Which, for anybody who certainly is maybe out of the UK, Birmingham is literally right in the heart of the United Kingdom. It's right there in the very middle. And is that actually Perry Common Road? Do we know? Have you actually managed to locate it there on the left?
I don't know that, but it is the general feel and look of Erdington, and it's still kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's still a little leafy. It's still laid out. It's still the same place. I recognised it instantly from the various pictures that I saw.
Yeah, Erdington is a lovely part of Birmingham. It's a very posh place, and that's why I don't live there, because I'm not posh enough. And
but that's posher, isn't it, Simon? Got posher.
And John was educated at King Edward VI School in Aston, which is also every bit as posh as it sounds. Aston is again beautiful. It's an area of Birmingham. It's a region of Birmingham, and King Edward VI School is just fantastic. And to say Birmingham, right in the heart of the United Kingdom, which is it's known as Central England, but it's right in the middle of the United Kingdom. There we go. There it is. And actually, I'm just looking on that map. Yeah, you can just about make out Lichfield, I think, on there, just to the north of where I live now. So you can see how close I am to Birmingham. But John, yes, as I say, he was educated at school in Aston. He knew very early on, actually, that he wanted to be an actor. That was his early ambition, was to be an actor. Sadly, his A-levels were not very good, and he didn't get on the university course that he wanted to. So he controversially decided against spending 3 years doing a degree that he didn't particularly want to do, and instead decided I'm just going to get a job in that case. I'm going to get a job in the theatre, because that's how John was. He was just a go-getter. So he decided to get a job in the theatre, which he did at the Alexandra Theatre in Birmingham. This is all Birmingham.
Well, it's changed.
The Alexandra that you're looking there on the right, that obviously is the new Alexandra.
Right.
Well, that's actually not the brand new one. That's been knocked down, and there's a new frontage completely again since. So this is the one I think that was put up in the 70s, maybe.
70s, yeah, something like that. But inside JT, on the left-hand side, it hasn't changed that much on the inside. Obviously, they've given it a lick of gold paint here and there so often, but it's very, very. If you were to go to the Alex today, it's very recognizable to exactly how it was when John was working in it, and he got an assistant stage manager job there, which allowed him to do small acting roles as well as working behind the scenes. So he was scratching both itches. And what I love about this is I only found this out years later, actually, that just around the corner, literally, and anybody that wants to come and do a trip around Birmingham, you should have been doing it a couple of weeks ago with all the Commonwealth Games on, because the vibe here was phenomenal. But it's still not too late. Come down to Birmingham, you can still see the bull in Centenary Square, I think it's parked at, the fantastic bull from the opening sequence, from the opening ceremony. And just around the corner from the Alex Theatre, literally behind it, is the Victoria Pub. And this
another landmark as well, isn't it?
It's a wonderful, wonderful pub. And you can see again that the picture on the right there actually is taken very, very recently. So you can see it hasn't changed at all. It's still magnificent inside as well.
A listed building, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
It's a listed building, isn't it? That's why,
It is a listed building. And so I would highly recommend, if you're going to come down to Birmingham, go and check out the Victoria, because that's where John would go and drink after work, because the Alex, as you're looking at the photo, the Alex Theatre where they're working is literally just to the left of that photo.
Because there's a sort of walkway that goes across the road into the main theatre itself from the front office, isn't there? And it's very, very strange when you first see it.
Correct.
We're talking about central Birmingham now, and central Birmingham pubs. Now, we do have, I think that's an ideal point to bring on our other panellists. Yes. Yes, she's here, and she was actually in Birmingham, out socialising a couple of weeks ago.
Nice recovery there.
But she is.
You get right the first time.
She's back. It's lovely to see her, and she's dressed the part too. Welcome back, Shah from Geek Ramble.
Oh no, you've got the one now. What a waste. Hi, I'm so
Good to
sorry
see
I'm so late. Hi, everyone.
All recovered now.
I don't know, I'm just going to have to accept that the whole drinking thing is just going to be my thing. But this is actual water.
Yeah, right.
Keep hydrated. Keep hydrated. Do you know Birmingham very well, Paul?
In the correct way, as happened in the 80s, you've crashed the party. So well done.
Well, 80s style, great.
You've crashed in
Paul,
late. Well done.
do you know Birmingham very well?
Yeah, I did a few things there. I've done some shows there as well in the past. But yeah, it's and I went for meetings about years ago about a possible revival of Crossroads there. It was a long time ago. That one.
Another one.
Whoa.
I remember when they brought back Crossroads last time. I remember it was just before Doctor Who came back, and I said to lots of people, JT, I said, look, if Crossroads can come back, Doctor Who can come back. But I can't recommend. Have you been to the Victoria, Shah? Do you know this pub?
I think I stumbled past it at one point. Yeah.
She's been thrown out of them all.
I've been in it. It's lovely.
I have.
Yeah.
I've been many times. I used to live in the Victoria for a while in the centre of town, and
But it's supposed to be frequented, isn't it, Simon? By lots of the actors and the people who work at the theatre will obviously once they've knocked off, they will drift in there and drown their sorrows.
You can 100% guarantee that after any show at the Alex, that is exactly where you'll find all of the cast and crew. They'll be all in the Victoria. Having a drink, so it's a wonderful place to go, and it's a beautiful pub inside.
Was there a connection?
People going to a pub after a show? I've never heard of it.
Was there a strong connection then between? Was it easy to make your way from theatre to television the way that JNT obviously inevitably did?
Well, no, not really at that point. I mean, what happened to him basically? He started. You just mentioned Crossroads, of course, because Crossroads was made in Birmingham, and JNT did extras roles on Crossroads. He managed to get the odd extras role on Crossroads, and it was around about this time that John Turner turned his name to John Nathan Turner, doing a corruption of Jonathan Turner into John Nathan Turner, because there was already a John Turner who was an actor, and so at this point John still thought he was going to make his way as an actor. Changed his name, but in his own words, he suddenly realised actually that as he described himself, he was a good amateur, but he was not a very good professional actor, and he realised it just was never going to work out, being the pragmatist that he was. And so that was it. He decided, okay, I'm giving it on up. I'm going to move on. And again, just being the go-getter that John was, he decided, right, okay, then I'll just go and work for the BBC. And that's what he did. He applied, and his first main job really was in BBC London as a floor assistant. Actually, earlier on in the chat, I noticed the wonderfully titled Scottish Davros and Friends Wrestle with Pop Culture. Rocket, I love the name, guys.
That's the new name for Daniel Leach, I should point out.
Daniel.
I love it, Daniel.
Oh, it is. I can see from the photo now. It's Daniel Leach. Well done, Daniel. Good name. Anyway, yeah, you asked, was he a floor manager in the 60s? He absolutely was. That's what he did. He went off to the BBC in London, became a floor assistant in 1968. And of course, then, as Paul was just mentioning, he worked on Doctor Who in the Space Pirates. That was his first Doctor Who role, was in 1969 on Space Pirates. But as we can see also from these photos, he did loads and loads of stuff in the 70s, throughout the 70s. That was his decade of doing so many different roles. He worked on Basil Brush, as we can see there, the Pallisers, which is bottom of your screen at the moment. And that, of course,
my first job at the BBC was on Basil Brush in '79.
Cool.
I animated the title sequence. And,
Really?
Oh, wow.
Cool.
They were filming it. The show was actually filmed at Pebble Mill in Birmingham, but all the titles were done in the East Tower, which is where
I love Basil.
It's like Jack and
I've got the
Rory
puppet.
and all that
Have you
stuff.
really?
Paul, you always drop out these little nuggets of various things that you've done across books and TV. It's quite extraordinary. But yeah, Basil Brush means a lot to a lot of people even now, doesn't it?
Mortgage somehow.
Yeah. But
I actually have one I use as a feather duster. I do. I use his tail as a feather
We
duster.
do a stream about Basil Brush in the future.
We should do
those days of the BBC were the very kind of, you could go to the BBC, you could work your way up at the BBC, but not today, though. I don't think it doesn't work that way today.
Kelly says here, Simon, The Palaces is still one of her favourite shows ever. I owned it on VHS, and now I've got it on Blu-ray. So it's a more popular show than I was certainly aware of.
Oh, it's huge.
Absolutely, and let's not forget that it was on The Palaces that John first met Anthony Ainley, who then he cast as the Master specifically because of having worked with him on The Palaces. So we got into that for that. And of course, there on the right hand side, of course, then is All Creatures, which is the main thing he was doing when he then really started to branch out within the BBC. And All Creatures was that was through All Creatures that I first met John Nathan Turner, which I have mentioned before now, when there was a charity cricket match for All Creatures Great and Small up in Yorkshire in 1978, or might have been 79, could even have been as late as 80, I don't know. But of course that was the one where John first started to get the idea of having Peter Davison in cricket whites as the Fifth Doctor, and so I remember seeing John Nathan Turner at that event before. So I think that was before he worked on Doctor Who. But I say, his first Doctor Who role was in Space Pirates in 1969, again as a floor assistant, and then as assistant floor manager, he moved on to Ambassadors of Death and Colony in Space. But I say, the Space Pirates was his first foray into Doctor Who. And then it was in 1977 that he became production unit manager on season 15 at the same time as really starting work on All Creatures Small as well. And
it wasn't unusual, was it? Simon, it wasn't unusual, was it, for staff to move across these shows, whatever genre they were, and sometimes, just as Paul said, some of them could have been filmed at Pebble Mill, some of them could have been at Television Centre. They would literally go anywhere, wouldn't they?
Well, what we've got to remember, as we've talked about in the past, is that the BBC was a very, very different, much better, in my opinion, beast to what it is nowadays, because it just had this enormous vault of talent and talented people and so many different departments all working. And so, yes, all these hugely talented people were constantly crisscrossing backwards and forwards across different productions. And so you had a pool. You simply had a pool. At that time, I think the biggest pool of talent in the entire world at that point, maybe Walt Disney Studios beat it. I don't know. It's questionable, and so that's why you would find yourself working on so many different productions. That's why everybody from
Peter Harrington has outed himself here.
Managers, whatever.
Peter Harrington's outed himself here as another Basil Brush fan, everybody. I'm getting a warm and cosy feeling talking about all this, and it's not just the weather. We've got a comment here from Digby Strawbridge here, who's looking at those pictures of Birmingham and says, would the panel ever consider doing a field trip to places like this? You know what? I think... What do you think, Sean?
Absolutely, I would love it.
Really have to ask.
We could actually do a pub crawl. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say I went in a couple of places with you, didn't I? And when you were in town, was it last year? Sometimes went to a few pubs.
Was it last year Christmas? No, the year before. Yeah, before.
In the run up to that. So it's possible we may get some sort of mobile recording devices on the go.
Yeah, we will.
It's down the road for you and me now.
I think this has got to happen.
It's got to happen.
I think this has absolutely got to happen, and we will get a Basil Brush. We'll bring him along somehow. We'll get one of those puppets on.
I think Sarah's put
I'll bring mine over.
Type 40 con, definitely. Type 40 con.
How much do we need to pitch in all for each for Matt's flight?
The classic fanboy. Carl is up for a guided tour here. Yeah, I think it would. Yeah. So the producership, though, Simon. I mean, how did it? It couldn't have just dropped into his lap, could it? He was floating around from show to show to show. So who tapped him for it?
To a large extent, really, we've got Graham Williams to thank for it because it was due. He started, as I say, John started work regularly on season 15 with Horror of Fan Rock, and actually then the Horror of Fan Rock, which opens season 15, it then begins an entirely unbroken run of stories for John Nathan Turner to have worked on the program right up until Survival at the very, very end. So from Horror of Fan Rock in 77 onwards, he worked on every Doctor Who story that existed after that point. And because he'd been working as production unit manager for some time by this point, by the end of the 70s, Graham Williams actually wanted to take him on as assistant producer for series 17. And the Sixth Floor denied that, said, no, you can't do that, Graham, sorry, you're on your own. And so that's how John Nathan Turner continued then as production unit manager on season 17. So then it was kind of logical that once Graham was going, who are we going to use? We're obviously going to use the person that Graham wanted to have as an assistant producer and has been there acting in a producing capacity on series 17. So actually he did kind of almost fall into it, which almost sounds like we're sort of doing him a disservice by saying it was accidental that he fell into it. Of course, that's not true. He was damn good at what he was doing, and that's why Graham wanted to take him on as an assistant.
He was the natural guy to go to. Then is that what you feel?
Absolutely,
Simon, Can you just explain the Sixth Floor to me and Shaw?
The sixth floor basically is literally that. It is the sixth. It was. We talk in the past tense here. It was the sixth floor, literally the sixth floor of BBC Television Centre, which was the concrete donut as you know it. And so that was basically where all of the upper echelon lived.
Big wigs
were the decision makers. I'm trying to
Yeah.
word, Ian, and I can't. Big wigs, yeah. The people who made the hiring and firing decisions, they would be the ones. So it was up to the sixth floor, for example, that dear John Nathan Turner went in '85 when it was being decided as to whether the show would continue or not. So you would be summoned literally to the sixth floor. The BBC weren't stupid. They knew what they're doing with their physical hierarchy. And you would go up to the sixth floor if you were invited up there. And you'd either be praised or you had to have your program axed.
That's a good point to actually say. Ask Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit about the reputation that the sixth floor had when you were there.
It was still men in suits and ties, and very much sort of like, you know, the hierarchy and all that sort of thing. I mean, when I joined the BBC, I first went for an interview in '78 because I decided not to go to. I was offered a place at university doing art and design, and I turned it down because I moved to London from the Staffordshire Moorlands, where my parents were living, and. It was a case of you haven't got your Bachelor of Arts degree, so you can't go and work in the art department, and you can't work in design because you haven't got a Bachelor of Arts degree. So that they found me work in what was laughingly called the animation, but it was rostrum cameras, and I worked my way up from rostrum cameras up to doing lots of other things and getting into through the back door that way. But I had a meeting with like men in suits, and they were all very proper and everything, but they were blown away by the portfolio, and it was the drive and the work that enabled me to do that.
So they did recognise talent when it came their way. They did recognise raw talent,
which is, I think, very much what happened with John. You know, that you know, they like to nurture, whereas now it's a case of not so much nurture, but if you fit certain categories,
that's what it is today.
Without going too much into great detail, it's a case of like, oh, you've done a degree in PR, so you can become a head of a department at such and such or something like that. I mean, I have to be careful what I said. I've just finished a contract for the BBC anyway.
I had somebody, the Suits visited me when I was doing Top of the Pops, and I didn't even realize there was. And that's when that people were saying, yeah, it's the people from the 6th floor. Oh, yeah. So I was doing the grass Top of the Pops, and they came in and they just stood behind me. And I was really nervous because everybody kept saying to me, if the people from the 6th floor comes and sees you, then you're in trouble. But I think they were just overlooking what was happening in Top of the Pops and what I was doing. But they didn't say anything to me. They just stood in the background like Darth Vader, you know, like just in a silhouette, just standing there looking. And I just got really nervous. So anyway,
a bit like Matt Pott there, who we can.
Yeah. Actually, he was one of them. Yeah.
Of course, this all culminated, didn't it, with him getting his hands on the best show on British TV, really, and inheriting the leading man of Tom Baker, wasn't it, Simon? Obviously, he'd worked with him in that capacity, as you said. He'd been on the show since Fang Rock. It does make you wonder: did they clash immediately? What were the pressing concerns that John found when he took the reins of this show? Because Tom was probably more proprietorial of it than Graham Williams was. Is how history would have you believe, wouldn't it?
I think it's probably fair to say that they clashed probably almost from day one. It's difficult because, of course, Tom Baker came back for Series 18, having been doing promotion in Australia, and actually came back not very well. He came back very run down, very tired, very exhausted. And so he was already kind of at a low ebb, if that makes sense. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Yeah. And John, of course, was very much on the ascension at that point. John would have been just so enthusiastic to just jump in straight away and get cracking. Whereas Tom was literally was 6 years into the role at this point. So it was kind of, he peaked probably personally and was just physically tired. And so I think they were probably almost going in two completely different directions at that point in time. John was going up, and Tom was probably kind of going down a little way.
I think
but I think they probably clashed almost immediately.
Sorry, Paul, what was that?
The clashing came about was that John wanted to put his own stamp on the show from day one, and he wanted to get away from the sort of puerile humour that had happened in the season before, which was very much down to Tom and Douglas Adams together on all that, which, you know, can't decry the talent that was Douglas Adams at all. An amazing writer, amazing man. But with script editing and Doctor Who, it just became, especially with the budget and everything back in those days, it just became a little bit cheesy, to say the least. Some of the stories were good, but some of them, you know, not so good. I mean, Bob hated the mandrels, the way the mandrels were made, because they were done on the cheap. They were made by the costume department and not by the special effects or the to sculpt monster masks or anything. You know, they were made on a singer sewing machine, and you can tell by the looks of them. they're like I said they reminded me of football mascots. You know, the actual costumes. That was the first Doctor Who that I was on the set of, was Nightmare of Eden. But with those sort of factors, John wanted to put a stamp on it for the title sequence, the look of the show, the way the show was shot, the way it was directed, the way it was written, and the way the characterizations changed and everything, and even the look of Tom's costume and everything. He wanted to make it look much more astute and adult, which it was losing what it had gained throughout the 60s and early to mid 70s.
So from your position as somebody in the industry, Paul, and somebody who say had been there on the set for that, when you returned to the set, did you notice a marked difference once John had taken over?
Oh yes, you could see a difference, because on the set of Nightmare of Eden, it's a bad example because everything was kicking off, and it wasn't a very pleasant set. It wasn't a very happy company at all. But you know, it was farcical, and obviously there was two camps. You know, there was of what was going on. I mean, now they embrace their guest stars and co-workers and things, but back in those days there was the leading man and leading lady, and then there was everybody else, you know. But John wanted to break that down and wanted it more family, you know, and you know, as a unit, as a working unit. I mean, he did actually, one of the things that people don't really seem to give him credit for was that he actually made it a nicer workspace and a much more sort of accessible show for people. Yeah.
Now you put it like that. It does seem again that he was, if not a visionary, Simon, and I think somebody who was slightly ahead of his time.
I think you really think he was both those things. I think he was a visionary and he was ahead of his time. And the thing that again we shouldn't take for granted here is that it would have been very, very easy for anybody as a new producer to come in to take over from Graham Williams and do the same kind of thing. Pretty much by that point in the run, the show was very comfortable.
And they obviously knew where it was going to go.
The machine by that point, it was on a production line, and so it would have been very easy for somebody to come in and do more of the same, maybe with a tweak here and a bit of a change there. And we have to give John credit for completely reinventing the show, because look, absolutely. You look at season 18, Meg Loss aside, we forget that one for a minute, but you look at season 18 and it couldn't be more different. He was a brave man. He could have just carried on as normal, but he didn't. He, as Paul said, he came in, he wanted to give it a kick at the backside and he wanted to change it entirely. And that's exactly what he did. He struggled it was by all accounts it was like wrestling to turn an ocean liner around, but he did it and it's there on screen. That's the key thing. It's there on screen.
It's a good job he did, because we wouldn't be here celebrating it all tonight, with so much to get into, so much to talk about.
Forget that and say
thanks for putting all that together, Simon. Fascinating stuff.
He was
and
vision.
I'll just say happy birthday, John Nathan Turner. And we're gonna.
I think Simon's still going.
we're having a few sound issues there with Simon, but I think he'll reconnect with us in a short while. But happy birthday, John Nathan Turner, and thanks for putting all that together as always. There, Simon, with the Doctor Who diary. Let's head back to the main chat now and see what else is going on.
Blimey.
Okay, yes, we're back, and as always, there's a lot to get into. When we come back, we're going to be comparing what all of this content that JNT gave us, what it all meant to each of us. We're going to discuss what it means to you right now, and maybe we can reveal some of what it may have meant to him throughout his life. Yeah. So before we get into all of that, there's so much to come, but this is that point in the show where, yes, Ian,
we win.
It's that time. Yeah, you can go and point Percy at the porcelain and relieve yourselves. Go and top up your mugs, glasses, or your cocktails while we check in with the Doctor Who, the Type 40 Doctor Who ad break. It's a little different this time. Yeah, you'll get the picture, but yeah, here it is. We'll see you back here in a couple of minutes for more of JNT.
It's 9 o'clock. Good morning. You're watching Galaxy, the entertainment channel. We're very proud now to present for the first time anywhere on British TV a Doctor Who weekend.
Debbie Flint.
And I'm Sharma Pereira. As you can see, your daily entertainment news programme 31 West has time travelled to the weekend.
It said 31 Who.
Which?
The title said 31 Who.
What? Oh, I went all funny then.
Probably something to do with this.
Oh, do you reckon there's anyone inside it?
A Time Lord, maybe.
Maybe Doctor Who, even.
Oh, no, not Doctor Who. Not even a Time Lord. Not even a hideous alien monster. I'm John Nathan Turner. I'm the former producer of Doctor Who, and I'm here for BSB's Galaxy Channel Doctor Who Weekend.
So we're in safe hands, then?
Indeed. You're looking forward to it?
Yes, very much. Are you?
I am. So welcome to 31 Who.
Yes, the TARDIS has landed in the studio at BSB and taken over the Galaxy Channel.
31 Who lasts the entire weekend. We begin at the beginning with the very first episode as the TARDIS, transformed into a police box, visits Britain in the mid-20th century.
In fact, we're showing 10 complete adventures from Doctor Who, the world's longest-running science fiction series. It's been going for 27 years now.
But the Doctor Who Weekend is more than just a collection of stories. We've invited stars, past and present, technicians of all kinds, Dalek makers, costume designers, radiophonics engineers, and many more. Here's a taste of what's to come.
Type 40 live with us here in the console room for more Doctor Who talk. And JT, we talked earlier on about John Nathan Turner and brand, how he recognised something in Doctor Who, something of a greater cultural scope and significance beyond what was on the TV. Simon often says that people, the viewers of Doctor Who, we don't watch it in a passive way. We want to own a little bit of it. And the licensing and the branding, that was something that, even though there'd been sort of jigsaws and Target books in the 70s, that really exploded thanks to John, didn't it? And he would definitely approve, I think, of a trip to Merchandise Paradise, wouldn't he?
I think he would love Merchandise Paradise, without a doubt.
So, yeah, let's top up those cocktails and yeah, hit the ignition. Okay, you're gonna like this, Paul.
You're gonna love this bit, Paul. This is very, very interesting bit.
Why are you wearing pajamas, JT?
This is my tribute to JNT. He would have loved it.
Expensive pajamas, sure.
It's incredible. It's incredible what you can get nowadays, isn't it?
Imported them from Florida.
Well, this one wasn't. This was from M&S.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's been a while since we looked at the pre-orders. So what have you found this time?
Yeah, welcome back to Merchandise Paradise. As usual, I just want to stress that all prices and information is correct as of recording, as we go out live here on Thursday, the 11th September 2022. And we do have some updates for you, Space Bookers, on stuff that we have spoken about very, very briefly, way back at the beginning of the year. The first update we've got for you is ages ago, we spoke and showed you the holding card for this, Doctor Who Origin Stories. Now, we had a quick chat about what could this be, what would it be. This week, that cover has become this cover. Well done, Dan.
Wow, love that.
What we've got here, as you can see, this is coming up very soon. Now, this is a hardback book from BBC Penguin Books. I have the blurb for you here. These are going to be 10 stories telling the origins of the very best of the Doctor's friends and some enemies, including, and get this, Space Bookers, Sarah Jane Smith, God love her, Clara Oswald, Amy Pond, Davros, and the Master. Now, what makes this also a nice bit of a selling point, if you're interested in this, is the stories which are written about Ace and Joe Grant have been written by Sophie Aldred and Katie Manning, respectively.
Ooh.
Oh,
Exactly.
wow.
Exactly. Now, Katie Manning, I remember her saying around Christmas that she was working on something that she couldn't talk about, and specifically writing. And I thought that was unusual because I don't think I've ever been aware of her writing anything before.
Paul, do you know if she's written anything before? I can't think of anything Katie's done.
Probably done a few shopping lists.
Handbags and shoes, absolutely, yeah. I've got the blurb for you here as well, Spacebookers. Whisked away from their lives on Earth, the Doctor's friends sail alien seas, save countless lives, and remind the Time Lord that he's a bit, well, human. But who were they before they met the Doctor? What adventures did they have before bumping into the untimely Time Lord? Dive into this collection of tales about the childhoods of the Doctor's friends and a couple of his enemies. And these are the origin stories you've been waiting for. This is quite an interesting twist, actually, because back in the 80s, under John's suggestion, we had a few books called The Companions of Doctor Who, which included Turlough and the Earthling Dilemma, Harry Sullivan's War, and then Terence Dudley's interpretation of K9 and Company. So, ages ago, where we were talking about Target books, we were saying, why haven't they continued that? So in this sense, they have, just as an origin story, because that's the in thing. Let's blame George Lucas for that one. So this is available to pre-order now. As you can see there from the graphic, it's going to be released on the 29th of September. It is a hardback book, which is unusual and very welcome in my eyes. Recommended retail price, $11.99.
Bit chunkier and nicer as a gift item, isn't it? When you get something like this in hardback. Do you buy the books, Shah? Have you got a collection of these? Would you buy this, or would you buy it for somebody else as a prezi or something?
No, I've said it before. If anyone likes this sort of thing, that's totally fine. But I cannot stand origin stories, especially if it's going to be about the Master or Davros. The companions are fine. But I feel like I've already got that. But yeah, I don't want to know anything about when I've got a bit of mystery, I want to keep it. So this isn't my kind of thing, but it's totally, obviously, if it's your thing, that's great. But
I respect that.
I completely get where you're coming from. How about you, Matt?
I've got a place right now where I can put the retail sticker. So covering a certain area of that book. But look, I don't really want to know about their origins, their true origins. I just love their adventures. I don't really want to know their background story, Little bits and pieces are fine, but the whole thing, nah. That's one thing I really hated about the new series, was that they gave Davros more of an origin story, and it really irked me. It was just not needed.
Somebody who writes, Ian, do you think this is kind of a consequence of new series Doctor Who? Because we've had minisodes in the past, we've had flashes back to Clara's life when she was a little girl and things. Is this an extension of what we've had on screen that JT is describing there?
Maybe, but I agree with Shah and I'm not interested in stuff like this. Thinking that, I don't know, one of them had adventures before they met the Doctor kind of destroys the whole object of them meeting the Doctor and going on adventures. You know what I mean? So what's the point? Yeah, what's the point?
I suppose it depends what we mean by it depends what we mean by adventures and what challenges they may face in day-to-day life, I suppose, doesn't it, JT? Like you said about those companions books back in the 80s.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if there's some sort of sci-fi element into some of these things, because of course when the characters start in the show, they don't know anything about time travel or aliens or anything like that. But if you are getting this and you're going to read it, do send us in a review, because we are, I'd be very interested to see what you say about it. But there you go. That is going to be available on the 29th of September, available to pre-order now. Okay. The next update we've got, if you were tuning in to Merchandise Paradise, okay, I'll go to that one. That's not what I was going to go to. Wait your turn and do the queue. Right, okay, skipping along though, this has been released in our half-term break. This is the cover now, of course, for the Abominable Snowmen. As you can see there, it's going to be released on the 5th of September. It's available for pre-order now. DVD is $14.99, the Blu-ray $19.99, and the Steelbook $29.99. This one has been long awaited. Obviously, we reported this, I think it was around about Christmas time that we first mentioned this. There have been various issues as to why this has been delayed. We've said before on the show, it's not just the Doctor Who range that is delayed. It's the entire BBC Studios DVD Blu-ray output. So please, please, please be patient with things. They are working as hard as they can to make sure that they can get some products on the way out to you. There's not much really that we can say about this apart from, it's available to pre-order now. I'm sure many of you, if you're collecting these, have done. It includes an animated black and white episodes 1 to 6, the animated color episodes 1 to 6, and I use the word animated loosely. Restored Surviving Original Episode 2, photographic reconstructions of episodes 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, making of documentary, audio commentaries, 8mm home movie footage, archive interview with writer Mervyn Haseman, a photo gallery, teaser trailer, PDF, ROM, content. So there you
don't know about you, JT. I know you collect these things too, but I know artwork. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I don't think they're trying with this artwork anymore. I know they've had problems with this line that it's coming to an end, but I feel like they've kind of given up there with that front cover.
They're using
the logo type on Abominable Snowmen. I mean, it's just like someone who doesn't really know how to do the perspective in Photoshop. Just messed about with it. And tried to make it look like an old 50s movie. It's dreadful. So there's no graphic ability there at all.
No, it looks it's very similar to the William Hartnell one as well. I think that the same person did that one, the Galaxy 4 one, the previous one. It looked exactly the same. Bad typo.
Artwork done by someone with just a left foot.
Yeah. Considering these steelbooks are kind of collectible, you know, they come at quite a hefty price tag as well. I think that they've it's just like they've stopped trying. I don't know if I'm expecting too much, but you're selling something as a sort of luxury item there, Simon. I will be adding this to my collection in one format or another, but I think I'll be spending as less as possible waiting for the sale. What do you think?
I mean, the steelbook cover itself, the front cover, I quite like. The inside, I mean, grief, could that be any more dull if it tried?
The back covers are always the worst too. They never even bother with the back covers, like with those steelbooks. They always look worse than the front. At least the front, they're trying to. You can see they're trying to sell.
And what frustrates me is, you know, every week on these live shows, and you always bring us a wonderful selection of, and it's always so much better than anything that's used on BBC products. I don't understand it. I don't get why they can't get some idea of what is going to sell a product. It's just like, when are you going to get this, guys? I don't understand it.
I suppose they could be slightly shackled by the fact that the artwork has got to reflect the production, JT, hadn't they? And this is the standard of animation that apparently we've got on this.
What?
I know they've got their limitations.
That's disgusting. I'm sorry.
Are you serious?
I'm sorry.
That's
really bad.
Those
that's
are
like
actual
they didn't even
screenshots.
try.
It reminds me of the Charlie cat animation. You know, Charlie.
Yeah, done with a pencil up there.
Yeah, Charlie says.
That's just that seriously is from
that is really bad.
From the production.
Lord
that's from the same people that did Fury from the Deep, isn't it? Because you can tell.
I'm not sure which team it is.
You know, so stiff. I've literally laughed out loud at their animation. Like, it is so bad that it's not intentionally funny, you know. But I've actually laughed out loud, and it's taken me right out of the story.
I mean, I suppose we have to accept that there is a budget for these releases, isn't the JT?
There is a budget for these releases, but that's why
Dan.
There is a budget for these releases, but that's why I always said don't bother until you've got a better budget. Just to point out that this, of course, is one of the Bog Fanish creative efforts, and they have done some of the others. I'm in total agreement with a lot of people. I don't call this animation at all. It's not animation. And in today's world, I don't think it's acceptable. And I'm actually very, very glad that this range is now ending pending review.
Yep.
Well, JT, I don't know about not animation. That's not even proper artwork.
Yeah.
That last one that they did as well.
I was shocked when I saw this, I have to say, because I have some of the standards of some of the other ones has been enough for me. I've been quite impressed by it in relative terms, but I think this is well below par. Everything from the likenesses to the little details. I mean, I can't speak for the movement because obviously I hadn't seen it. We've got Mega the Extremist in the chat says, how is it possible that these animations have actually devolved over the last 16 years? The Invasion was from 2006 and was far superior to this.
Well, it was a totally different
professional animation company too, weren't they? That was the ones that did Danger Mouse and that.
I suppose
Cosgrove Hall in Manchester did the original one. Unfortunately, they can't do that anymore, so it's such a shame.
And we have to accept, I suppose, JT, that they did say that the reason why there wasn't another one after the invasion for so long was because it had become cost prohibitive. This was a compromise, a middle ground, but they do seem to have been all over the place with them. I'm not sure whether, obviously this is the end of the range for all intents for now, isn't it? What do you know about what could come next?
Not at liberty to say.
Okay. Stay tuned, as JNT would say. Stay tuned. So, what do you want to look at next? What's next on merchandise?
If you're watching Merchandise Paradise before the half-term break, you would have seen us going through the start of the 2023 Danilo range, and we actually brought to you the covers and the information for the block calendar and the diary. On that particular, which was only 3 weeks ago, I was unable to say, I can't show you anything else because they haven't released it. This very week, however, this has dropped. This is the Adventures of the 13th Doctor Calendar 2023.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Oh, bless.
I have the blurb. I have been sent the blurb for this. The 13th Doctor Square calendar. This calendar will mark the greatest adventures of the 13th Doctor, played by Jodie Whittaker, with stunning images of monthly
Stunning images? Where?
This is there is plenty of room to write all your important dates in the large monthly date panels provided. That's all the blurb they have on this. This is available if you are a Jodie Whittaker fan. God love you. This is available for you to pre-order now from the Who Shop and Amazon. And it's going to be dropping into stores, including the Calendar Club, of course, where you can also pre-order, and Danilo.com, its own website there as well. It's going to be available from September the 17th.
Can I point something out there? They've actually repeated some of the photographs of the snapshots of Jodie Whittaker there. They've actually just recolored them.
Well, they have to, because there's no other
so few that
they can use. Yeah, because we have to remember that in production, the Chibnall era ended last year. It was gone. It's done. It was dusted last year. So anything
nearly a year ago, wasn't it? The centenary special was filmed at the end of September last year.
This is so dull. I don't like this era, but I have seen fan art of people that do like this era, and it has been just 100 times better.
Didn't they take photographs on the set? Like production stills they could have used to.
Yeah, a lot of them are encouraged.
She had 5 years to make good photos,
But barely, it seems like barely any. Shah, the other day on Twitter, you tweeted me, you retweeted me into some great artwork by a upcoming artist, didn't you? And it was brilliant. So when you see that, exactly. So when you see that and then see this being put out, I mean, would you hang this in the kitchen or in the smallest room in the house, or would you pass on this?
I mean, at best, in the shed. I don't know. That's
in the toilet.
I don't think that will be in my household, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I think she's a beautiful woman, but no.
Look, I'm the greatest artist in the world, but I can't make her look good. So.
Do they really expect?
Oh dear.
Do they really expect it's what on sale September the 17th. So on September the 18th, that's going to be 99p in the bargain bins. Let's be honest.
I don't think it's going to be that soon. I don't think it's going to be that soon. But just to let you know that the recommended retail price will be $10.99. Now, just to point out to people that don't know, Danilo do an entire range from the legendary Cliff Richard, from Doctor Who, to lovely fluffy cats and stuff like that. So if you're going along to the calendar clubs, you will have a huge chunk. As soon as we get the calendar for what they call the classic range, we'll bring that to you. Okay.
There's no accounting for taste. There are some people. We've got Ian Scales who says that the cover photo is great, and maybe it'll be okay for some people. We'll see. I think it's the general thumbs down.
Is probably the first image, and that's being quite generous, I think. Just because everything else is so posed. Why is it so posed? Just make the Doctor look natural, and it's really not that hard.
I am going to defend Danilo here, because we have spoken about Danilo a lot of times. They can only work with the images they're given by BBC Studios. They were the images that were given by BBC Studios. That's it. They don't get anything else. They don't get access to the set to go in and do their own photographs. They have to play with what they're given with. So because of that, let's give them a little bit of leeway, and let's see what they come up with in 2 years' time for Shooty's Doctor.
No offense, but even as a designer, you can get creative.
Yeah.
With what you're given, Sorry.
There must be something better that's washed up on the shores this week, JT.
Absolutely. And this point, Facebookers, I do want to stress yet again that the information I'm giving you on Merchandise Paradise is a correct as of going live and recording this show on Thursday, the 11th of September 2022. So that is quite important for this next bit for reasons we won't go into at the time. But the latest in the exclusive sets for B and M from Character Options have this week fallen through, and we've got the details coming up. The first one we've got there is the History of the Daleks Part 9, which, of course, as you can see, chronicles the planet of the Daleks. So again, these will be exclusive to B and M. This one includes... Now, all these, apparently, according to Character Options, are slightly repainted and revised editions of things that have been produced before. That can be seen with the Invisible Dalek, which was originally released as part of the 50th anniversary celebration stories with the John Pertwee action figure. You can see there that the painting of when the Doctor sprays the Dalek to bring it back to visibility is not as dark and not as much as it was on the original one. So it's just as infamous amongst the Character Options fans and people that collect these things. The Invisible Dalek is back in that box set, along with the Dalek Supreme, which is the first time, I believe, the Supreme Dalek has been available since the original collector set about 11 years ago. So that's now available.
I do like this line of Daleks. They're bringing them out 2 by 2, aren't they?
I would buy these.
Yes, yeah, and they are going to be available from B&M stores from, at the moment, September the 12th. Now, we all know what the distribution is like in B&M stores, so don't expect them to be on the shelves on September the 12th. If they are, well done you. But from September the 12th. Okay. This is the History of the Daleks box 10, which details, as you can see, that the death of the Daleks with 2 stunning-looking Daleks there. Yes, I know some of the fanatics have been going on about there's something wrong and there's lack of paint on the gun store and those little bits there. I don't care. I think they are absolutely gorgeous, and if you're collecting those box sets, they are a must-have. Right now, the recommended retail price for those. The
finish of them, sorry, JT. The finish just seems so nicely done, really carefully done.
Absolutely, they do. The recommended retail price for these is going to be $22.99 apparently, but you never know; it might change. Now, again, this is an update on something that we've spoken about ages and ages ago, at the beginning of the year when we knew these were coming. We also showed you that there was going to be a couple of other releases that were coming along, and personally I'm a little bit disappointed because they are re-releasing the 8th Doctor set and the 10th Doctor set. Now, the reason I use re-release is because these are all variations on the 8th Doctor figures that have already been out. So as you can see from the original 11 Doctors box set, you've got the 8th Doctor in a slightly different paint. The Character Options are very, very keen to point this out. You've got Paul McGann wearing Christopher Eccleston's costume in that middle one, and he's got a lovely handbag there, which is just absolute nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Stands out like a sore thumb. When it's next to the 3rd version of the Night of the Doctor action figure there, which is, again, it's another repaint. Now, this is going to be a recommended retail price of $20.99 again from September the 12th. So if
these
you missed,
been available before.
I missed this, so I'm quite happy about this.
So these are, Sarah, were they available before in different sets paired with different things? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, the original TV movie version of the 8 Doctor was available in that.
Yep.
Oh.
Can you see that?
That one well. Yep. That's
so that was in there.
Oh, that's the one I've got. Yeah.
Yep. So he was available in that, and then there was a version of him also in that one, which was the 50th anniversary year one, when he came with the Alpha Dalek, which was from the Doctor Who magazine range. And then, of course, the Night of the Doctor was a version of that.
Yes.
I like that one.
We've had several versions of that. So this will be the 3rd version again. But if you're like starry-eyed and you've missed them, then there you go. You can get them all in a box, and it's quite a nice little box. I just still don't like that middle one. Why is he wearing Christopher Eccleston's costume?
It's the costume for the Big Finish series Dark Eyes, which was set in contemporary Earth, and they released 4 box sets of those around 12. It was about 10 years ago, something like that. So I think that's what it's for. But it's again, it's that character line, isn't it? They did it with some of their Primeval figures, didn't they? They reused some of the molds for some Doctor Who figures when Series 11 launched. I think, for example, that Bradley Walsh's character, whose name I've bloody forgotten already, but he was a repainted version of Douglas Henshaw's character from Primeval. It was along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And character options, because of circumstances, have had to do that. But certainly that's the Paul McGann head from the Night of the Doctor figure on the Christopher Eccleston action figure for the Ninth Doctor. Bit cheeky that. For me, it just sticks out as a sore thumb. There's no progression there in the costume. But if you missed the middle one when it came out a couple of years ago from a Bog Fanish range, which had a blue Dalek with it, there you go. You can get it here. So the last one coming from the BMN collectors is this, yet again, the infamous 10th Doctor. The repaint this time is the Doctor from the Sarah Jane Smith adventure, The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith, parts 1 and 2.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. So that's why the blue is a little bit more vibrant, because it was in, if you remember in the episodes for Sarah Jane Adventures, it was a little bit more vibrant there.
It was.
So you've got him without the coat, with the coat. Okay. And then you've got him. Well, I was a bit confused about this, because this is the ragged look, which apparently is the 10th Doctor from comic strip adventures. So I would assume that's the Titan range, because it certainly wasn't the Doctor Who magazine range.
Scraping I mean, as much as I like the 10th Doctor, I think we're scraping the barrel of...
Well, it certainly is, because they've done it again. They've put the David Tennant head on the Matt Smith body.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Oh, from the 11th hour figure.
Oh, that's
naughty character options.
Naughty.
I admire the gall of this and the creativity and kind of trying to give the fans different variations, because people out there do make custom figures, don't they? But I think this could be a stretch too far, and I can see this one putting people's backs up. People who are completists, which I know being a completist is probably our problem, but yeah, this leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I think, JT, I don't mind.
Speaking of being completist. Yeah. On the right one there, why is it unfinished? If you look at his trousers, if you look just below his shirt on the right, on his, it'd be his left leg. Just have a look at where the lines stop.
I think that's just the shade of the angle of the photograph.
I don't know if it is, because I've seen that before when people have got them. I don't know how they've got them.
I think she's right.
But
yeah,
I've seen that before, and I was waiting for something like this to come along. You know, I think they're all shocking, but. Yeah,
well, considering that, I think
really underwhelmed with that.
No, I think considering that it's this and it's that body, I can confirm that the pinstripes are actually in place. I can't see them letting that one go unless there's something in the stories, because I don't know which comic strip, as I say, that has come from. Unless there's something in there
I suppose it could be just the image that's prepared, because they do prepare those images in advance, don't they?
Absolutely.
Richard Brooks says, love the figures, the Daleks, sorry, but these figures are not for me. So obviously everybody's got the things they're going to jump on, and maybe not.
Absolutely. But there you go. They're going to be available from September the 12th in B&M stores across the country. So that's the updates for you. Now we've got some brand new stuff that's come along while we've been off air on our half-term break. The first thing I want to go to is I'm actually quite excited. This building on the success of last year's Dalek graphic novel. Panini have announced Daleks: The Ultimate Comic Strip Collection. This is going to be available from the 1st of October, and again, you can pre-order it now. The blurb for this is: pitless war machines committed to universal conquest, the Daleks have terrified and enthralled Doctor Who fans for generations. Here, collected together for the first time, Panini Comics proudly presents the first volume of Dalek stories taken from Doctor Who magazine's 40 years of award-winning comic strip. Now, this contains, get yourself ready for these stories, this contains The Return of the Daleks, Absalom Dark, Dalek Killer, Star Tigers, Doctor Who and the Dogs of Doom, Nemesis of the Daleks, which is one of my favorites, and Metamorphosis.
That's a great collection of stories there from Doctor Who magazine. I'd forgotten that the Daleks were absent from the magazine for quite some time. Matt, as a comics guy yourself, sort of American comic books, have you got these stories in any format in old DWMs? Will you jump on this?
Oh yeah, if it was available here, I would. The one that they released a couple of years back. I tried so hard. I kept going back to my newsagents to see if I was able to get it. The one that sold out very quickly.
The Dalek
I
one,
love this. I love the retro style of that. I really do. And
Well, can I just point out on that point for any of our foreign cousins that are actually watching this now, you can pre-order this now from the Who shop, and they do have an international department. Yes, you will have to pay for the rates to get it from the UK to wherever you are, but you can pre-order it from the Who shop right now.
Superb. Yeah, I think I'm going to have this. I was holding fire until I heard what was in it, but now this does sound good. I can't deny.
How many pages is that, Dan?
I have
How many
no
pages?
idea. Do you know,
Give us
JT?
the page count, but I would imagine because it's got so many stories in, I would imagine it would be significant. So I would imagine it would be weighty.
Okay, they go by weight when they post.
Absolutely. So that's available to pre-order now. It's a paperback from Panini, £17.59, available from October the 1st, 2022. Okay, so finally for this edition of Merchandise Paradise, again, a slight update. This we actually reported on at the beginning of the year because I noticed that a book called Doctor Who and the Daleks had suddenly appeared listed on Amazon, and it promptly disappeared, but we did have a quick discussion about what this would be. And here it is. All is now revealed. Doctor Who and the Daleks by David Whittaker. This is a hardback book and available from November the 3rd. And the blurb is a dramatic reinvention of the very first Doctor Who novel from 1963 and the hundreds of novels that followed it. But few can claim to have surpassed its powerful storytelling and unique atmosphere. Written by Doctor Who's first story editor, David Whittaker, and lavishly illustrated by acclaimed comic book artist Robert Hack. This is adapted from Terry Nation's first Dalek story, Doctor Who and the Daleks, sees Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright caught up in the flight through time and space of the mysterious Doctor and his granddaughter, Susan. They travel in the TARDIS to the planet Skaro, where they will strive to save the peace-loving Thals from the evil intentions of the hideous Daleks. So this is an ultimate edition of an iconic novel, a deluxe volume that embraces both proud tradition and modern innovation to present the drama of a Dalek dystopia as you've never seen it before. Now, I have mine on pre-order from the Who Shop. I am absolutely delighted and excited to have this, but part of me is slightly worried because this looks like it's already hit the best-selling books.
Really?
So could this be a Harry Potter? Because what Bloomsbury did a few years ago, I don't know if you know this, but they did the same thing with the J.K. Rowling novels, and they illustrated them, and they are gorgeous hardback books.
I remember
Since
them
now
coming
also
out.
available on paperback. And I'm just thinking maybe that was the inspiration of a whole range of books coming our way. And if that's the case, better start saving up, kids. So this is available now. This is a recommended retail price of £30. It is a coffee table style book, and it is obviously hardback, but you can pre-order that right now.
It looks beautiful. My wallet is weeping already, Sarah. I'm a huge fan of Robert Hack. I've been following his work for years. He's illustrated several Doctor Who comic books back when they were good, when they were at IDW, and I just think the illustrations in this look so romantic and so perfect.
They're not computerized either. They're actual proper illustrations, and I think they're actually done in acrylics or watercolors. It's actually done them as pieces of art as opposed to doing it on coloring on the computer. Afterwards.
Are you going to be getting this, Paul?
Sorry?
Are you going to be getting this?
Well, I pre-ordered it early in the year, and it just became an unknown title, and it stayed in my Amazon box, in my box on Amazon, and I've got it for £17.20.
Wow, that's a bargain.
Send us a link, mate. Send us a link. Yeah.
Well, I have had it on pre-order since January.
that could do
That's
it.
because it looks like it's a decent work of art, and that's on his Twitter feed. He put a photograph of the stack of all the actual pieces of artwork.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, because I follow him on Twitter. Yeah, it was on proper thick cartridge paper. It seemed like.
That's why you could see that he'd actually hand painted every single, hand colored every single drawing.
If you're going to do something like this, then you go to the original book, don't you? You go to the one that was written to start it all off because it is unique. If you've never read the Target book, this is something that I would recommend wholeheartedly that you invest in because
I'm on Amazon UK at the moment, and it's currently on for £22. Just
right. Do not leave this show to get it.
Pre-ordering now.
People do seem to like this.
Price is £30, but have a shop around for it. That's only the RIP. It is available. Just before we go, we better just say it is available, as I say, from the Who Shop, Amazon. It's going to be available from Forbidden Planet. It is available from galaxy4.co.uk, their online site. It's going to be available from Waterstones. It's going to be available from selected WH Smiths. You've got a range of bookshops there. If you've got a local bookshop, please support them. Get the ISBN number get it ordered from them. They will absolutely value your business.
That does seem like a popular new title here. Just looking at the response in the live chat, people say it's beautiful. The illustration. I think with a book like this, Simon, you know, I've read Doctor Who and the Daleks multiple times.
Yeah. Me too.
But I own it. I think 3 or 4. But it's very pretty, isn't it? Do you think you'll be pulling the trigger?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so on this one, because I can only echo what JT said. I still maintain that the original Daleks novel is the best Target novel, I think, of the entire range. And there's some cracking Target novels out there, but it is just beautifully written. And if you haven't ever read it, I just can't recommend it highly enough. It's got just the most wonderful atmosphere about it. It doesn't follow, it kind of half follows and half doesn't follow the television serial. That doesn't matter at all. It's just beautifully written. And you're right, the illustrations just look great in this. That's absolutely my cup of tea. That's the kind of thing I want to be spending my Doctor Who money on. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And because it comes out on November the 3rd, it's a fantastic Christmas present for the Doctor Who fan in your life. So maybe don't drop hints. Tell people that's what you want. Give them all the details and say that's what you want, and you want it wrapped, and you want it under the tree on Christmas Eve, and then that's you for Christmas Day and Boxing Day, having a lovely time. That's it from Merchandise Paradise. We'll be back as soon as we can, because there are some other things brewing. So stay tuned. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Keep watching when we drop these little segments that Dan is doing now on this day and also of Merchandise Paradise, and stay with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for putting it together, JT. Yes, always gets a laugh, doesn't it?
That's just perfect for JNT.
Yeah.
And also, it fits in with our 80s theme, celebrating the man himself.
Yeah, here we are again, reconnecting back to talk about John Nathan Turner, the man who produced more classic Doctor Who than anybody else, a much discussed figure. You know, he's a man who has had books written about him, had documentaries put together about him. Chris Chapman's brilliant film, The Showman. You know, we've talked about that too. But of course, that is that's a sort of writ large version of John Nathan Turner. How he has how his material, the material that he put out, brought to our screens, its extended life, sort of in that direction, is a parallel but slightly different to how it was received by children at the time and those who come to it now. You know, we spoke a little earlier on about it in context to the 80s in particular, didn't we, Sarah? And you know, whether you were there or whether you weren't, you know, how closely identified is it with that age? But for all that JNT seemed to be quite a man slightly ahead of his time, and he was certainly a populist, wasn't he, Ian? You know, you say he was down there in the top of the pop studio. He's very sort of into whatever was going on. So as much as he was a populist, nobody's perfect, are they? And everybody makes mistakes. But I personally feel that we've got a huge amount to be thankful to John Nathan Turner for. And, you know, speaking to the guys who knew him personally, who worked alongside him, I believe you worked alongside him, didn't you, Paul?
Well, I designed the panto things for him, and I did the Children in Need for him. The giant check. I got someone to make the check, and when Pertwee brings it out the TARDIS, you see this big drawing of Colin and a Dalek and everything. I drew that, and he kept roping me in to do things. It's like, you know, if it was going to be too much for one of the in-house departments to do, I'd get a phone call and he'd get me to do bits and pieces for him. But the pantos and other bits and pieces, and after Doctor Who as well. I mean, we went for a meeting with Pickwick Entertainment in Elstree, and we were going to do a series of, back then, VHSs of West End stars singing the songs from the musicals, because John's big passion was musicals, musical film and musical theatre. Oh, you've got it there.
He was a man full of ideas, then, is how it seemed. And this is what he roped you into doing, this enormous check.
Well, the thing with this check is he had it obviously for a big visual thing on air to make an impact. And he then took it over to an American convention and raffled it off for more money than what was written on the check. So that was how John's mind worked. That you can do, if you do something like this, and especially because all those Doctor Who stars are there holding on that check, and at the end of when we did the filming at the studios to do this, because it went out live, he got everybody that you can see there and a few others like Matthew and Waterhouse and a few other people to actually sign the check. So it's I don't know if someone's got it on their wall somewhere in America, but after all these years, all the bits have probably fallen off because some of the stuff was stuck on with Pritt stick.
And you're in America, get in touch with us and send us a picture. We need to see it.
But
it's quite likely.
He had a different side to him that people didn't know about or see. That he was very much into obviously publicizing the show and doing anything, even like we're going to change it from being a police box. It was never going to happen, but he just knew that he was going to get column inches off the back of it. But something like that, he knew it was to make extra money for a good cause for children in need.
The idea seemed to be core that it's better to be for the show to be talked about. Even if it was Flights of Fancy, complete invention, keeping it in the papers when it was off screen, keeping it in the news cycle, that's probably something we're quite used to now. But headlines like this TARDIS, which is notorious at the time, and I remember kids panicking in the playground, the TARDIS, that the exterior, that it may not be a police box anymore, because the idea was that kids didn't recognise police boxes anymore, so why keep it? And Charles Catchpole was the reporter there. That's a name from the past as well. But this caught people's imaginations and got people talking, and they played into it. Sure enough, when season 22 started, they flirted, didn't they, with changing the chameleon circuit? But using the press like this,
that news actually made it over here too.
Yeah, well, John was friendly with these head show business writers on the tabloids, like Catchpole and also Jeff Baker on
there's a name
on what was it on the Daily Star. So it was like so he knew how they would ring him up on a very empty news day and say, have you got anything that we could put in? Can you think of something? And he would make something up. And obviously when the Doctor in Distress thing happened and everything, the cancellation and everything, I was called in and we had a meeting at the Albertine Wine Bar at the bottom of Wood Lane, and it was like a brainstorm, like we've got to think of some ideas, and I suggested, why don't we do a record, Save Doctor Who record.
And that was your suggestion.
That was your idea.
Yeah,
well, do you know what we went through a couple of weeks ago?
It was my idea to do a Save Doctor Who record, but it got spiraled out of control by Ian Levine getting involved. And Gary Downey suggesting that we make something like
Band-Aid,
South African accent, like Live Aid, and to which I cringed because I wanted to do. I had a friend who I'd done a deal with, Jerry Anderson, on a song that appeared in Terrorhawks called SOS Mr. Tracy. And this friend of mine was going to write
I love that one.
A Doctor Who tribute record. And it was all geared up that he was going to do it and everything. And then Ian Levine said, no one else can do this but me.
It turned into one of those, did it?
Yes, it turned into one of those. I mean, I've done a couple of magazine interviews recently, so I've exposed the true story behind it all. But John pushed for it. John was ringing the studio to find out what was going on, and there was people that were turning up that walked away when they heard the song, and there were PR people there that were like turning the likes of Frankie Goes to Hollywood away and people like that, because don't turn up to the studio, we're cancelling you, cancel your taxi, you're not coming. When they heard, John always said to me afterwards, he said, the thing is, Paul, it kept it in the news, and that's all we wanted. And years later, he said, well, it gave us a few more seasons because it kept it going in the papers. Otherwise,
you very kindly sent a couple of your own personal snaps from your days of knowing JNT too, haven't you? So this it looks like it's from a party. But which one are you, mate? I can't quite see you.
Well, believe it or not, that guy in the background with the dark hair,
yes,
right, that is, or was, I mean, I don't know if they're still married, but that was Nicola Bryant's husband or boyfriend at the time, because she was there. That's Linda Barron's daughter, my friend Sarah Lee, who I also did a dance record with together, the two of us in the late 80s. And the idea was I was going to the fancy dress party, as you can see on the far left, as the
80s, because that looks like the most 80s thing I've ever
That
seen.
is so 80s. Yeah.
This was about this was before Doctor in Distress. This was about 83, 84.
Yeah,
it was been about late either 83 or 84. This party, and it was I bought a property in West London, and we obviously we decided to have a soap opera fancy dress party, as you do. Gary Downey turned up in a long white coat with a stethoscope round his neck, and I said, "Who are you meant to be?" And he said, "Dr. Kildare." I said, "That's going back a bit," but I was going. It was Dynasty days, so it must have been about 84. I went as Alexis Colby. No, I went as Crystal Carrington. I went as Crystal, and that's Linda Barron's necklace that's around my neck. She wore that in the musical Follies. And John turned up, and he decided to come as Joan Collins' Alexis, because I was going as Crystal.
Gotcha.
So he walked through the door and said, and took a big puff, and that cigarette was on a cigarette holder when he walked in. He took a big puff on his cigarette, and everybody just turned and looked at him because of that hat he was wearing, and
the lampshade,
and the Hawaiian pattern dress, as you can see, and Hawaiian shirt dress that he was wearing, and
it's very demure. You look a bit like the chick out the Human League there, mate.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, actually, Sarah did the makeup then, but he turned around, and as he came in, pierced his lips, took a drag on the cigarette holder, and said, "Crystal, you look like shite." "Alexis, darling, why have you got a lampshade on your head?" And to which he just looked at me and said, "You bitch." But that was the relationship. That was the friendship. It's like off screen and out.
Was there a swimming pool?
That's a good point. If there was a swimming pool around,
exactly.
Reenact
a few odd things. Well, I've tried to drown him in the bath, but it wasn't good enough. We would meet up for drinks and everything like that, and have dinner parties and do all sorts of things that normal people would do, and we would never really discuss Doctor Who. It never really came into the conversation. It was just either television or it was films. And like I said, his big passion was musical theatre. He absolutely loved it. I mean, he had tickets to go see one of the premiere nights of Les Mis, Les Miserables. And he handed them over to me and Sarah. So Sarah and I went, and we had to sit behind Biggins and Bonnie before she was even in Doctor Who, and all we could hear was Biggins going on and on and on, rather than trying to concentrate on the musical.
Doesn't sound like him.
Oh, that's a bit apt. You've got that handy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Simon, I wanted to ask you as well about your time knowing JNT and booking him too for the mega quiz. So what was the mega quiz? Like, I know because I was there, but for the people who weren't there, what was the mega quiz? We've got some pictures from the mega quiz somewhere. Yeah. But this was your brainchild, sort of, wasn't it?
The mega quiz. Well, it was actually, I have to give credit to Dan Cartwright. It was actually his brainchild, and he brought it to me, thinking that I wouldn't be remotely interested in doing it. I immediately just leapt on it. So this would be 1988, I think, and we ran it in 1989. So it might have been early '89. So the show was very much on the wane at that point. And the truth is that JNT at that point was very, very unpopular with fandom. And so we just hatched this idea of a quiz. And who are we going to get to host this quiz? Well, John Nathan Turner, of course, you know, the boss of Doctor Who, of course, he's going to host the quiz. And it was in, again, of course, Birmingham, which so it tied in beautifully for him. I think he came out and saw his family at the time. As you can see there on the left-hand side, we've got Liz Sladen. We brought her out of retirement, bless her. She pretty much stopped doing conventions at that point.
She was so nervous as well, wasn't she? I remember.
Oh, yeah, she was nervous because she just didn't think people still wanted to see her, bless her. She just didn't think anybody would be remotely interested in seeing her in Doctor Who, you know, at a Doctor Who event. And as I say, John was very... he was a bulliant. John is exactly as John is. He's larger than life. He was a bulliant. And he was the life and soul of the event. But again, as I say, he was quite surprised that we actually wanted him there because he was very much persona non grata at the time with amongst Doctor Who's fan circle.
I like how in the picture that you've supplied, he was got a fag on the go.
Yeah,
I remember his demeanour as being very Richard Whiteley that day.
Of course he did. He had a fag throughout the whole show. He was the question master. He was the host and question master of the entire show, and he just really threw himself into it. This was an event in that it was a mega quiz. It wasn't a convention. There were no panels. Nobody sat down and interviewed him and asked him questions about the show. So this was very much not about John promoting the show in any way at all. He just threw himself into the fact that he was there. We gave him a sheet of questions and said, there you go, just host it. We threw him very much into the deep end. And said, just ask the questions. And I love the fact that you can just about see there, he's got question marks all over his tie. He came, correctly attired with a question mark tie because he was the question master and the master ceremonies. And he just threw, and of course, yes, he smoked throughout the whole thing because that's what people did in the 80s.
You're allowed to smoke anywhere, weren't you?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that was where I first got to know John because it was from that event. We booked him up to do that event, but then it wasn't until many years later that I actually then saw him again at a convention. And we hadn't struck up a friendship at that point. And I just sort of went up to him and said, John, I know you won't remember this because it was about 10 years ago at this point. I know you won't remember this, but you hosted an event for us in Birmingham. And straight away, he remembered everything about it. He knew all about it. He did remember. He said, of course I remember you. It's just really, really sweet. And that was how we then struck up a friendship because I just never thought he would have remembered me or the event. But he did.
Because he'd have gone to so many events all over the world.
Absolutely.
Various different nations in front of thousands, I suppose, of people over time.
People remember when they're respected. You know, when they're not respected, they try to tend not to remember past events. So you know,
and we gave him total respect, which is to say he wasn't getting a lot from fans.
I think I understand what you were saying.
Time. We just welcomed.
It was a bizarre time at that point in the 80s.
Fantastic. Am I out of sync?
Yes. Yeah.
You're out of sync as well.
Yeah.
Like a Japanese movie.
We've also got this picture from you too, haven't we, JT, from your childhood?
Yeah. That was from the aforementioned Children in Need event at Blackpool's Doctor Who exhibition, the infamous exhibition up at Blackpool. John Nathan Turner was there with Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant. They were doing a public event. I have never seen so many people in my life at that point. I was 15. And that was the first time I'd met John, Colin and Nicola. I actually showed John this picture many, many years later because I actually got to know him towards the end of his life. And he just went, oh, yes, that's the man. You know, as if to say that's the one he remembered because he looked differently towards the end of his life. But it was so busy, and they were all sitting around the TARDIS console. Gosh, as back in those days, you didn't police things like they do now. Yeah. They didn't charge for autographs. They just signed and signed and signed and signed and signed, and it was continual. As I say, it was massive, and they got on with it, and it was wonderful. What a great day! It was a brilliant day, and treasured memories.
It's good to see him smiling. Obviously, so colourful, so 80s there. He's forever
can I ask
linked.
something? Did he actually have a minder? Did he have a minder, like, or could you just go up to him?
No. This was Britain back in the days. They didn't do all that nonsense. They just turned up.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask everybody, really, in light of the fact everything that we've talked about, and all those 130 plus episodes that he produced, and 9 seasons, and now with all these years on since, JNT sadly passed away 20 years ago. But it is true that a lot of these seasons, even season 24, is being reappraised. I think when that came out on Blu-ray, which really surprised me. So I was just wondering, really, I grew up watching these episodes. I was at school when they were coming on, and this was very much the birth of my love of Doctor Who. I know what it meant to me at the time. It meant the world to me. And at the time, I think I felt that I was the only, it's the standard story. I felt like I was the only Doctor Who fan in the world. I know what it means to me, but I wondered what it means to you guys. So, starting with you, Sarah. I mean, when you watch this material now, can you think of a couple of things that we hear a lot of talk, don't we, about the things that JNT got wrong, and that's, I think, when somebody is experimental, when somebody is audacious, and when somebody is maybe up against it. Sometimes they're bound to get things wrong, but what for you did he get right? What are the things that you want to give thanks to JNT for as we mark his 75th birthday with this show?
It's really funny because obviously I was an outsider to this, so I only know JNT from what Russell interviewed other actors. So JNT was like this mythical being of it was always, and JNT did this and JNT, and we thought this is very much in the spirit of JNT. So it was interesting when I started delving into the classic series just to see how much he was responsible for. And again, just things that I take for granted as a young Doctor Who fan today. The stakes for the companions, it was always kind of, yes, the companion would be in danger for maybe a few episodes, but it'd always end okay. And then, you got Adric getting killed. You got Perry's fate in Mind Warp, which I think is just absolutely brilliant. And I look about it in time, and I know there was many naff things about that era, but and I was like, wow, that. And again, you just take it for granted with all this modern television. He went there. Wow, they actually made the decision to kill off a companion, and they didn't always have a happy fate. It wasn't like Rose, being reunited with her dad, and so again, my cat wanted to be part of that. So yeah, the stakes, and again, I just think he understood the joy of having past characters together. I really like the two Doctors. I will die on this hill.
See, we've all got our favourite stories, haven't we? They're often what people would term as guilty pleasures. I personally, I don't believe in guilty pleasures, but we all kind of wince and talk about some of the things that we love so much about it. But what you said about the companions, about Perry, is true. I think he tried things, didn't he? With Turlo in particular, the idea of having this quite malevolent character there at the beginning. It's very, very bold. Probably didn't work, but it's better that somebody tries stuff like that and fail. It was still memorable. Even the stuff that probably didn't work out the way that he would have wanted, the way that the actor would have wanted, was still quite memorable. So stuff may get written down in the history books as a failure, Ian, but to me, as a little kid, it was my favourite show, and I was thrilled by it all.
I did like Peter Davison. I liked when he cast Peter Davison as the Doctor, because it was very brave of him to cast someone that was younger. Or was he younger?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess he was. Yeah. And also, I did warm to him immediately when they cast Peter Davison. But for me, sadly, that's when I left Doctor Who, because when they cast Colin Baker after Peter, I just didn't warm to him at all. And then when they had Sylvester McCoy, I just tuned off completely. It's only years later I watched some of Collins and Sylvester. You could see he was trying his best to try and make the show better. And you got to take your hat off to him, as Sarah says, killing off a companion, Perry's fate, all that stuff he tried. And you know, as I said, he was the face of Doctor Who. You know, he was trying to push it. Nobody believed in him. People just didn't care about Doctor Who in the BBC. So for that, and for him to keep going and pushing Doctor Who, and it's because of him, as JT says, because of him, this is what we got now. I salute him. Which one? That one. I salute him and say thank you very much. But that's all I can say about JNT's reign, basically.
What do you think about this, Simon? I mean, it was a heady time to be a Doctor Who fan. You know, it was when you started bringing fans together. But for all that we talk about those days with this sort of rose-tinted view, sometimes, you know, the 80s was a troubled time for the show. But there is a lot to enjoy, isn't there? So, what do you think we have to thank JNT for, looking back?
And just very quickly to answer Kev Doctor Who fan man in the chat who says, sorry, Simon, memory doesn't cheat, which of course is one of JNT's famous catchphrases where he did infamously say the memory. He was wrong for saying that, because no, the memory doesn't cheat. And so for me, a lot of the JNT stuff is just as good as it
Just as good as what had gone before, you mean?
So he was wrong in saying it. But yeah, absolutely.
But in a sense, though, for those things that we know him for, though, Simon, those phrases like the memory cheating, that people remember those. But that was part of what JNT, the position that he put himself in as being somebody who was facing the public, facing his critics, as well as taking the bouquets. He was there to sort of, I don't know if he was protecting the show, protecting the brand, protecting his cast. He wasn't a coward, JNT. That was the impression. Certainly not professionally, I don't think he was a coward. Obviously, I can't speak personally. But he would say things like that, which, you know, you could say it sounds ridiculous, the memory cheats. But I don't necessarily think he was wrong.
But he was. But at the end of the day, he was producer of the show. He might have got it slightly wrong. Who knows? He certainly made some bad decisions. But to answer your question, two of the things that I think he got absolutely right. One was the Five Faces season, which we just talked about earlier, seriously, if you were there at the time and you hadn't had these out of Doctor repeats that we had at the time, honestly, we've talked about it in the past, you can't begin to get your head around just how incredible that was. Your life suddenly felt like it. And also, the Doctor Who and the Monsters season, it just was the absolute best at the time because for
fans like Matt Pott in Australia, Tasmania, they would get these regular repeats all the time of all sorts of Doctors. It was unheard of in the UK, and JNT made that happen for us, Matt.
Wow, that's like, you know, I mean, I grew up after the John Pertwee years, but we had John Pertwee 4 years, you know, and so they would just literally go John Pertwee, then Tom Baker, and then it started all over again with John Pertwee. And so, that went for years, you know.
So how about you, Matt? You weren't aware who JNT was when you were a child, but you are now, and obviously
now
we're in the Blu-ray age.
The imprint he left in it, you know.
Yeah. So, what are the things that you think you're most thankful for JNT's involvement in the show for?
Well, Peter Davison for one. Yeah. He's my doctor. Sure, I grew up on John Pertwee and Tom Baker, but they'd already been established and everything. For me, I got to see Peter Davison from his that regeneration to his last day, and to me, that's my thinking of Doctor Who is always Peter Davison, you know, as the Doctor for me. For those years, I mean, I watched it from the beginning right to the very end of the credits. You know, I stayed there and I was just like, you know, it's you know, that's my show. Second one might be a bit controversial because I know it's not very popular, but I've always liked the question marks on the collar.
Hey, go on.
One of those. Just, it's probably a design choice. It's something that's not I mean, later on in the years, it got a little bit like, you know, the umbrella and all that sort of thing. But, you know, it was just a little bit less defined, but it was there. It was part of the costume. And you know, I never really ever thought of question marks as being, you know, something a little bit too pantomime-ish. But that's the next thing I'm really thankful for. And lastly is Sophie Aldrich. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that her companion, the companion that she created, and he helped decide on who was going to be Sylvester's thing, because I was never a fan of Mel or any, like, Perry either. I wasn't really a Perry either, but Ace didn't scream as much, and she actually kicked butt. And so I'm really thankful that, you know, and when I met Sophie, I just gushed all over her. And she
Heather
gave me
Sulu
little love
asks
hearts
him
and
at
stuff, and I was
Tom Baker had question marks in the season before, if I remember right. They were a lot
did,
more subtle back then, though, weren't they?
Yeah.
He did. Mm.
Yeah, but to me, it was part of Peter Davison's costume more than anything, you know, and it was subtle too. To me, it was subtle. It was
right.
something that you just noticed that it was, you know, because it was Peter Davison was such a great actor. You know, you didn't just go, oh, he's got question marks on his collar. It was just part of the costume.
We've got a comment here from Java Bean who says that I adored the TARDIS Inside Out book. Yeah, JNT did write a couple of books, didn't he, during his time in the big chair back on Doctor Who, TARDIS Inside Out and the Companions. I've got both of these. Both are quite nicely illustrated, aren't they? You try his hand at these things. I don't know how much of them he actually wrote. Maybe
all of it.
That wasn't you as well, was it, Paul?
Can I ask a question? I don't know the answer to this, but was Peter Davison the first one to thump the console?
No.
Who was the first one then, JT? Tom. Oh, okay.
I do remember Tom doing it on a couple of occasions, and then it became a running theme of the Doctor's character.
Okay. Daniel Leach is also an Ace fan there. So, Matt, you're not alone, matching the right actress to the right character.
I was at the right age too, if you know what I mean. Good.
He fought so hard to keep the show alive, says Crimpline de Bloom.
He did. Yes,
We've got lots of comments like that. People really appreciate that. Daniel Leach says Paradise Towers is a guilty pleasure of mine. Darren Bradley, he's told, how many times have you told me this story, Darren? But I'm going to read it again. JNT always knew my brother and I as the twins, so much so he brought it up more than once that he wished he'd cast us both in the twin dilemma. I'm not sure if that's a blessing or not.
Yeah, because those actors were the most wooden actors I've ever seen. So
dead actors never work in Doctor Who, early Doctor Who anyway.
Have you not, Geeky, have you not watched television today? There's lots of wooden actors on television.
God, yeah.
I know, but
allowed on television.
How about you then, Shah? When you watch these stories from the 80s, what stands out? What stands out to you about them? And what, if anything, can you actually, listening to all this talk about JNT, can you think, oh, that was him?
Well, this is probably the one and only time that I kind of have an advantage on you guys. Because I don't think I was even a twinkle in my mother's eye when this was all going on. So, well, at least I hope I wasn't, because it was about 10. But it means that I can watch it. I mean, I know you can all do it now, but at the time you're all watching it live, whereas I can go back and see what I've seen, and then I grew up in the New Who era. But what I love so much about this era is the fact that he had the biggest task ever, having to come after Tom Baker's era. Then he ended up, I'm not a massive fan of Peter Davison. I've never have been. I know a lot of people are, but I was more a Sylvester fan. Bringing in people like Tegan, I know. Bringing in people like Tegan and Ace, I just loved it so much. I think it was very much a product of the time, but at the same time, it was one of those where, like, you never, in the old Who, going back to 60s and 70s, all the girls were like damsels in distress, weren't they? But I feel like this was the time when it started to be a bit of more of a, like, no, the girls can beat the living daylights out of a Dalek if they really, really want to. And I love Ace so much. And I think he did a really good job with what he could do with it. I felt like he was given the worst time to do things, and it was a massive shame. I don't feel like it should have even been cancelled when it was, because I do actually love those three Doctors, kind of not as much Davison, but yeah, 100%. as well, with the whole, killing certain characters that hadn't really been done that much before. If it had at all, please correct me on that one. Having stories that had never really been brought out or thought of. And I mean, the costumes, they were a look. I feel like it was just all about trying new things. I think that was, going back to listen to my mum, my parents, it would be, oh yeah, but that's what the 80s was all about, trying new things. But I feel like that was definitely shown in that show as well. And some things worked and some things definitely didn't, but I just loved it. And I've only recently, and I'm talking the past 3 or 4 months, have delved into this era, but I'm very, very glad that I have. It's nice.
How about you, JT? I mean, we go deep dives on a lot of these stories, don't we? And particularly the stuff from the 80s, I think because of the time period and JNT's meticulous record keeping too, as we know the new book from Richard Molesworth, it's not long being out. We know more about this era than any other, simply because it's probably closer. It makes more sense. Does it still hold a magic, the same magic for you, or a related kind of magic? And what do you think we have now most to be thankful to JNT for, in particular, creatively?
Well, of course, we've got to be thankful for the fact that the show is still going. Yes, okay, it had a production break, but it's still going. And as I said at the top of this show, John laid the platform. He built the foundations, and all Russell and Moffat and everybody else that's come after did was build on that, because it was all there waiting for them. The BBC knew that they had what was called a sleeping giant. They knew that if they did it right, there was a waiting fan base. What other television show in the United Kingdom had that? It had a fan base. It had families ready for it to come back to. The time was right for it, and then it had a dormant worldwide fan base, which John helped to establish, and actually, in my book, did establish. So. That there's an awful lot to be grateful. There are elements in the reboot Who that John created. I mean, you're still hearing the cloister bell today, which was a gimmick from Christopher H. Bismead to cost cut, and all this sort of stuff. And there it is, and it's still being used today. I'm very grateful to John because I feel very lucky to have known him towards the end of his life. And he gave me that. That is from John. That is the only thing I ever got from the infamous Horde that Paul will know about. He gave me this mug, which used to sit apparently in the production office in West London, and he gave me that one day.
I've never seen one of those before. It's like proper blue, proper midnight blue with the neon tube logo that seems to connect around the back of the mug.
Yeah, it goes right round like that. And apparently it sat in the production office for years, and Beautiful. He gave me that one day and said, you can have this bit of rubbish. So it was that every time I see that thing, I think of that day in the pub where he just turned up with this. But there's so much that I think Doctor Who fans need to be grateful for. I've said before on this show as well, because I knew him at a time, he was very reflective, and Paul will be able to back this up. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. And I knew him at a time when he had a lot of regrets to do with Doctor Who. I mean, you guys were just touching on there about things that could arguably went wrong during his era. To keep going the way he did, and bearing in mind as well that he was forced to do the last few years because there was no other job. In those days, if you were at the BBC, you would get moved into another post. He was there at a time when that was changing. He was the last BBC paid member of staff on the books. And they wouldn't move him to another show. They offered him stuff in the mid-80s, like Bergerac and stuff, which he regretted not taking, by the way. Because that was one of his many regrets. But he regretted other things, like the look of Colin Baker's costume, not listening to Peter Davison on a particular thing. He was full of all this hindsight and regret about what he did. But,
we did see that in some of the interviews, didn't we? The interview he gave on the Doctor's VHS release, in particular, was quite candid.
Probably. I mean, it was just how he was, but he was a consummate professional. He was Mr. Showbiz. He was making decisions that were right at the time. Geek Rambles was saying there, about the characters and stuff. I mean, that was very much built on the 70s characters, and if you haven't seen that, people like Leela and Romana, Sarah Jane were all very headstrong. That's where it really properly started, from Joe Grant onwards, really, and it was built up and built up. But John was able to move the show with the times. Mm-hmm. But I'm just very grateful that I got to know him and had some great times with John, and I will remember that to my dying day.
I mean, I know I go on about Sylvester McCoy and how the show was falling. But when you think about it, it wasn't really his fault. He was fighting for Doctor Who to be great, and they wouldn't give him the budget. They wouldn't help him. You know what I mean? The guy was on his own, let's face it. And, you know, as I said, you got to take your hat off to that. He fought to the bitter end, didn't he? Until it got cancelled, you know.
That's certainly how it appears to me. And Peter Harrington says in the chat there was such a huge fan base when it ended in 1989, but it saw it through to 2005, and JNT helped in that. Maybe he did set down a little bit of the path. Paul, as somebody who worked with him, who works in television and in production, do you recognise those qualities, those things that you respect? Do you think now that people would look back with kinder eyes of his time in that role, in a situation where I wouldn't say he couldn't win, but he was certainly, just as Ian says, his back was kind of against the wall?
Oh yeah, he knew that, and he fought it against it. He fought it in the best way he could, because obviously he was gagged or restricted in what he could do or couldn't say, because at the end of the day, it's like with the protest and everything like that for the cancellation, he worked meticulously in secret behind the scenes, fueling newspaper stories with his contacts and everything, which was basically, he was attacking his own employers, which was not the dumb thing. It certainly isn't the dumb thing back then.
Very extreme.
And he did his utmost, because he believed that, you know, the show was loved, the show was a British institution, and it deserved better than just being written off the way that Michael Braid wanted it to be written off, because it didn't fit in with the way he wanted to control the BBC at that time. So that was what John was up against, and he fought damn hard. So I think, you know, there was a select group of hardcore, what were so-called Doctor Who fans towards the end of the 80s who attacked him, you know, for many reasons other than the fact that the show wasn't what they wanted it to be. That it was like there was a private vendetta from certain magazines and certain people that resented him and didn't like him for their own personal reasons. And he knew that. Gary knew that. Gary would have stand-up rows with these people. I didn't go to any conventions in the late 80s or mid to late 80s. I mean, because I just dropped out of all that sort of thing because I was too busy working. But you know, he obviously went to all those things, and he had to face this sort of backlash. But you know, regardless of that, the British public to him is what counted, and it's the old thing, like it's bums on seats. It's like if you get the viewers, you're doing well. And he was getting the viewers. I mean, even
seem to understand the British public.
We've got amazing viewers, you know.
Oh, huge view. I mean, that's one thing that's been lost today. They're forgetting about the most important aspect of the viewers, and that's why you've got to be neutral and everything, because you've got to draw. John understood that. John was the last producer of the show, regular producer of the show, and he was very much of that ilk, where it was the entertainment that was important, nothing else. It was just the entertainment. And being Mr. Show Business, he knew that it was in his blood. You know, I can tell you about John as well. I reckon that when it came back in 2005, he would have loved every single bloody minute of that revival. He would have been an ambassador for that show. He would have been on every plane going, every convention going. He would have been, whether they wanted him to or not, he would have promoted it all the way through. He would have given his life and soul to it. He would have been everywhere. But I tell you what, as well, as a little twist to that, he'd be loving every single minute of the last 5 years, because what goes around comes around.
Oh, yeah.
He would love every single part of it.
Is that, go on, Shai, what were you going to say?
I had my hand raised, but I thought, you know what?
I thought you were stretching. Go on. What were you going to say?
No, all I was going to say, and it was just going back to what you were saying, Paul. So for me, what's so interesting and why because I understand there's all the fans anyway, but what's really interesting to me is to actually see and know of a show, producer that actually fights for a show, because someone like myself, who has had to endure 5 years of a showrunner, because it is a showrunner now, JT, I know you hate the phrase, that does not do anything for the show and doesn't do anything for its fans. It is so refreshing to know that there was someone out there that actually did. And I'm not saying that no one else did, but you get things like that and you just think, yes, if everyone did that, if every producer or showrunner, whatever title it's put on now, did that, we could be in a lot better position than we are right now. And it does show, and I've grown to appreciate actually what you guys talk about when you talk about the old days, because it does make such a difference. And I can understand your frustration a lot more since I started being on this panel and doing this show with you guys, just how much it has changed and just how much I understand how much you must miss a show that you loved so much.
Oh yeah, it's two totally different shows. I mean, it's supposed to be a continuation, but it no way is. And they've tried to, with the reboot version, they've tried to keep up with what they assume is modern day technique. They shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't assume what a modern day audience. They should have just carried on where John left off, basically, and told a bloody good story and forgot everything else. And they haven't. And they haven't. And that's where it is.
We have some lovely comments in the chat, JT. We've got lots of people actually rounding on things that are supposed to be unpopular and say, you know, that's my guilty pleasure, or I really like that about it, or it's funny how perceived received fan wisdom. There are lots of people who go against that, and I think that as time goes on, as things get reappraised, Sarah, you know, we reappraise. You must see that on Twitter just like I do. It's only going to increase, isn't it? I mean, Gobby Guy in the chat says, in my humble opinion, JNT was an unsung hero. Peter Harrington says the stories are great in his era. Just sometimes the budgets didn't help, but fantastic tales were told. And that's all we really want from a show like Doctor Who, isn't it? It's what Russell has given us. Now, I agree, JT. I think that John would have been there, holding on to it all for dear life, and pushing it, and would have turned up to anything they'd invite him to, alongside Barry Letts.
He wouldn't have needed an invite. He wouldn't have needed an invite. He would have been there anyway. You know, he would have just crashed anything, because that's what John was like. He would have just gone. He would have loved being part of a new version. He would have supported it up to a point so much, like, you know, but he would have done more than God love them, like Barry and Terence did. He would have been an unofficial ambassador, I tell you. And
I was there with him at the Paul McGann launch when it was shown on the big screen, and it was him that got me the invite to go. And he was very supportive of the Philip Seagal film, very supportive of it, and he really liked it, and he knew where it was going. But my most enduring memory of John, and it's apt that it's his 75th birthday today, and it's hard to think. I couldn't imagine him being a 75-year-old, to be quite honest, because I still think he'd have a lot of vavavoom about himself. But I think he would put a lot of things straight, a lot of people's opinions and everything. And the point I was trying to make earlier on is that when people were attacking him, he didn't take it personally. He didn't fight back. All he cared about was the show, which, you know, that's all that mattered. And my most enduring memory of him was obviously after he died, was at the funeral in the crematorium. And his coffin wheeling behind the curtains to, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And you're going to finish on top. And now he's having the last laugh because people have reappraised his life, his approach to the program, and his actual care and love for the program. I turned around once and said, "Are you a fan of Doctor Who?" I actually said that to him. We were in a meeting about one of the pantos, and Gary said, "Don't be so stupid, Paul. He's not a fan, he's the producer." And I got a wink and a twinkle in John's eye, because, you know, that he was. He cared about it. Yeah. Cared about it for years. You know.
And
Julian Raxel.
Your baby.
Yeah. Julian Raxall says here, Shah, that his producer tenure starts with The Leisure Hive, ends with Survival, with so many twists and turns along the way. It's a fascinating and supremely entertaining legacy, and that does connect with my own personal things that I'm thankful to him for. Is that word legacy? I think he recognised. We talked about it a little earlier on. I think he recognised. Independently, I don't think he was looking at what Gene Roddenberry was doing with Star Trek in the 70s, where he was desperately trying to make that happen. I don't think he would have been aware of that. I think he was too busy doggedly working on his own career. But I think he was aware of the breadth of popular culture in every other respect. And he was more than aware of Star Wars, for example, and of things like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't think he was preemptive of what we now call sort of expanded universe with the MCU and things like that. But I think he knew that Doctor Who was a brand. I think he understood that people had grown up watching the show, that even though it was slightly underfed and people were complacent all around it, I think he knew what it could be. I think he understood that those people who'd grown up watching it were very invested in it, and you could mobilize that there was momentum behind it, and that it was of long-term cultural significance and potentially a playground for massive amounts of creativity. I mean, I'm obviously very grateful for him. His casting choices, casting against type. He cast Peter Davison, who is very much my Doctor. Sorry, Sharp, but I agree with Ian. It's very much my Doctor. And again, Peter Davison was against type. I would imagine he had to, even though he was a popular actor, I imagine he probably had to fight for him. On paper, he seems like totally not Doctor Who material, and yet he recognised that latent.
During that time in the BBC, right? The people that spoke in the BBC or were talking in the BBC in the water cooler or whatever, the people that actually worked in the building, it was kind of like Twitter in those days. So there were a lot of people in the building that hated Doctor Who, didn't like how cheap it was. They thought it should come off, and then lots of people started talking about it. And then obviously his son, wherever the guy's name is, came in. Yeah, Michael. And he hated it. He wanted it off, right? Because of what everybody was saying. And maybe because he didn't like it anyway. But what they didn't see was what he saw, which is the fans, which is this huge amount of fans that love Doctor Who, no matter what. And that equals money, that equals justification to make the show, and yet the people at the BBC were in charge couldn't see that. So,
yeah, I mean, I also think that only JNT, and this is the last thing I wanted to mention, only JNT, I believe, recognised that this wasn't just a kids' show, that it was for everybody, that generations of people sat and watched it together, and that you could speak on those different kind of levels. Yeah. I want to say thank you to Paul Tams for joining us on this edition of the show. I know you've got to shoot off, but it's been wonderful hearing your stories, seeing your pictures. Please come back again soon. You're always delightful company, and keep rocking the grey, my friend. It really does suit you.
It's the Sean Connery look. Yeah,
that's the way. That's the way. You take care. I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye. One thing I'd like to pick up on what you said there, Dan, about John is that it might not have had the title back then, but John was very aware of the potential for spin-offs. He brought us K9 and Company.
Yes.
And he had this vision of where things go. He was behind not just K9 and Company, but he actually encouraged the commissioning of the Target range, as I said earlier, which is the companions of, which should have been a set
I didn't realise that was him.
He was so behind it. He was very much a case of, look at this. So because he actually had an awful lot of involvement with the Target range during his time, which I know W.H. Allen sometimes weren't very happy about, but he saw all these potentials, and he had these sort of things like K9. Yeah, I mean, he would never admit it, obviously, while he was alive, but that was a potential series. He wanted to be the first producer to have a spin-off series of something that was successful and carry on going with that. There were other things. He was aware of all that. Again, he was ahead of his time. He knew that, hang on a minute, there could be 3 or 4 different characters here. And had we had the resources back then, and had we had the confidence from the BBC, that may have happened. So, it was a great thing. But of course, from another point of view, he was the only producer of Doctor Who to this very day that whose show had a #1 hit record in the UK chart. For 1 week in 1987, the Time Lords
Yeah.
had a record that got to number 1. You know, and that was 1987 when the show was in that period. But good
KLF.
for John, you know, it's
Oh yeah, I forgot. We'll keep going back to that episode, don't we?
Yeah.
People have been asking for a sequel to that, believe it or
no,
not.
no.
Really?
I'm still having nightmares.
I
Dan.
know.
It's not going well, but I've just realised one more thing that I am really thankful for Mr. JNT
Yes.
is the fact that he pissed off Mary Whitehouse so good.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
You know,
He played Mary Whitehouse quite well. I think some of the other producers before him were running scared a little of Mary Whitehouse, and he realised even that was potential to market and further the show, Shah.
And I wasn't even alive in that, and it's the fact that it is still a massive thing to this day because Doctor Who's so violent, whatever.
Yeah.
And okay, there were things there that hadn't been seen before, as I mentioned, but the fact that is still a point that people make just says everything to me.
Yeah, it's weird actually because you know I actually think we need a Mary Whitehouse character today because some of the stuff that they broadcast on British television today is absolute dribble and absolutely dire and just tack.
Well, we won't go
So I'm
into
thinking, I saw something by accident the other day at Families when I was flicking over where the contestants are all nude. What the hell is that about?
Do you want to tell him your story, Shah?
Don't give any stories. Let's stick to the point of JNT.
The
whole point of Mary Whitehouse is that somebody like Mary Whitehouse is needed today to rein these idiots and this new generation of utter stupid kids coming in. They need to be towed in. But as you
Things
say
have
with
gone
John,
far the other way.
With John, he knew he again ahead of his time. He knew a marketing strategy from learning about the Save K9 campaign onwards. It was all based on the initial reaction when it was released. K9's leaving the show, and then that whole thing blew up, and that's when he went, I can do this again and again and again and again. Very clever.
I think we need to bring back open air or points of view. You know, we
Oh yeah.
I think we need to get Chibnall in to actually sit down and listen to the criticism because JNT had to do it.
Well, he's gone now, Sarah. He's gone now. He's history. We don't need to talk about him anymore or anything like that. He is now gone.
Brian Took.
Probably Russell from now on, wouldn't it? We need to look at how they need to look how John handled everything because when you look at the tapes of John and you look at his interviews, Simon mentioned earlier he would be on Blue Peter, he would be on Saturday Superstore, he would be on It Takes Two, he would be on Open Air, he would be on Nationwide, he would be on the news, he would be on local news, he would do whatever he could to keep the show in the public eye.
Yeah.
But he was so classy. He really was, and it wasn't about him, and it wasn't about boundless energy. It was considered, and it was sort of planned in a way, and he would always twist everything back around. There's a beautiful example of John on Saturday Superstore one morning where they're talking about why you're talking about changing the TARDIS. It's a wonderful thing. I remember watching it live back at the time in 1984. And a viewer phones in and says, what's your favorite Doctor Who story that you've done? And John says The Keeper of Traken because it looks gorgeous and it's fabulous. And then he switches and then he says, oh, and by the way, the Twin Dilemma also looks good because that was the next story that was coming. Absolute genius.
Never missed an opportunity, did he? Never missed an opportunity. Simon, I know you're having sound problems, but I want to give you sort of the last word on this.
If you can.
I think he may want to go out. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just sign it down, it'll be fine.
Just sign.
Okay, well, look, John Nathan Turner would have been 75 tomorrow as of recording this, but if you're streaming this or listening to it or whatever you're doing with it, it may be today, it may have been the other day. But this is the beauty of it with time travel and with the streaming age, isn't it? We can celebrate JNT's birthday over a few days and thank him for everything that he did for the show, for our favourite show, that kept it on screen, kept it in our hearts, and kept it in the papers, and undoubtedly led in a major way to it being picked up again in the 21st century. I agree. He would have been as proud as Punch And I'd like to think that he would have enjoyed going over it with us again tonight.
Oh, he would have loved this show. I can guarantee you we would have got him on this and he would have loved every minute of it. Yeah. But his input would have been intense. He would have loved it.
Excellent. I think it's time to wrap up this show with there you go, there's a pretty picture. There's John Nathan Turner with lots of doctors, lots of companions on stage in Chicago, I believe that was sometime in the mid-80s. Heaven knows what's happened to Patrick Troughton's facial hair there, but everybody else, I think that's Peter Moffat, isn't it? And I think that's Fiona Cumming and Nicola Bryant, Mary Tam, Louise Jameson, Karen Ford. They're all there. Ian Marter, Janet Fielding, Tom Baker, everybody Liz Sladen. They're all there.
My Doctor Who.
Oh,
that
era. I didn't recognise her at the start. Look at them there. Can't believe that
was the huge 20th anniversary birthday convention in 1983 in Chicago. It was infamous in Britain because hardly any of us could get there. But then again, we hit back with Longleat. So that's another show.
that's how I remember him, in the Hawaiian shirt, surrounded by cast members or photographers or both, and smiling whether he wanted to or not. And yet they're front-facing, one of the faces of Doctor Who, and one of the faces, for me, one of the faces of the 80s generally. And when his name would appear on the end credits to my favourite show, to me, that guy was a mogul. He was a big name, produced by John Nathan Turner. And I think the only trick that they missed was having him that signature, his signature, whenever you met JNT, he would always sign his signature in a very particular way. And I think that should have been streaking across that end title sequence like that. That would have been fun. It's on the front of this. This is available from Big Finish in 2 volumes, the John Nathan Turner memoirs. You can hear JNT in his own voice recount his entire career. And he's quite selective about what he says, but it's really entertaining. I've listened to this so many times. So if you do want to, hear the man talk about it in his own words.
How old was he when he died?
There. He was only 55.
Oh, wow. That's young.
He was young. He was taken to.
I also want to recommend some other listening from us here at Type 40. Type 40 episode 55 was when we had on Chris Chapman, who made that fantastic film, The Showman, which is on the season 26 Blu-ray set. It's like a feature-length production full of previously unknown nuggets about JNT's life and career, filmed in and around Birmingham and everywhere else. A brilliant film. And Chris was very generous with his time and very open with the entire production process. And then we spoke to Richard Molesworth, who at the other end of it, he was the guy who had the unenviable task of inheriting and collating all of JNT's production paperwork and turning it into a book that was released earlier this year, the JNT Production Diaries. And we got him on the show for episode 103, and we talked about that at length, the entire painstaking process, and his own respect for JNT that I think that came along. He knew JNT too, of course, but how researching that book, showing him in a new light there. So both those episodes, numbers 55 and 103, for more JNT stuff. Let us know what you think. I mean, we're very, very grateful to everybody who's been commenting along in the live chat on YouTube and Facebook here. I think it's great to see so many people willing to say what they liked about this era, about the 80s, and people obviously very somber, I suppose, that he did pass away so young that he's not here with us here on his 75th birthday. Obviously, it would have been lovely. Kev, Doctor Who fan man, says he did lots of good and lots of bad. It's all in the past now. Let's take the glasses off as fans and move on. Thanks for that.
I don't think we can do that. I'm going to disagree with that completely because I will defend JNT.
That's not what tonight's about, really.
It's not. It's about celebrating him and the fact that if we hadn't had all his work, all his input and what he did, the show would not be here today. It's a simple fact.
Yeah. I've always seen Doctor Who as being the neglected child, and JNT's gone, I'll take it. You know, and then he's looked after it, and then they've said, "Oh, we're going to take it back." You know,
If the show had ended in 1979, if you remember the 1979 series, had nobody taken it on at 1979, it would not have returned this century. End of story.
Well,
Ian Scale says, "Bless
they
you,
kicked him out, didn't
JNT."
Matt, they kicked him out. Kicked him out with the child.
Yeah, well, no, they kicked the child. They threw him out. You know, they threw him out, and they kept the child and neglected it again. So you know, but at least it had 10 years of good. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cam's Crash Course says thanks JNT and happy birthday. He's a hero. Something for us all to think about there. Simon says Julian Raxel. Rest in peace offers Lord Thoth. And classy again says Lord Thoth. And Gobby Guy says, it's because he actually cared about the show. Thank you to everybody who's commented along there.
If there is an afterlife, if there is a heaven, John will not be peaceful in any way. He'll be doing a show business, a huge show business show with everybody that's up there. He will be organising them all.
He'll be organising the chorus line, wouldn't he?
But you'd be making 3 doctors up there.
Yeah. Just talking Doctor Who, it'd be with show business legends, all of it. It would be in his.
He'll have Peter Cushing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Bit of a gimmick.
We will almost certainly return to the subject at some point. In fact, there's one particular story that John Nathan Turner was behind, a feat that he pulled off that we're going to dedicate an entire show to later on in the year. You can probably guess which one that is. We're not going to talk about it now, but I can't wait to get stuck into that. But sincerely, thank you to everybody who's joined our celebration, joined the party for JNT's 75th birthday on this edition of Type 40 Live. Keep the comments coming. Keep the comment section active. We love all that. Or get in touch with us through our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type 40 Doctor Who there. Or you can join us in the Type 40 Facebook group where the celebrations will continue. And you can share your thoughts and your stories. Maybe you met the big man too. Maybe he signed something. Maybe he told you that you could have been cast in one of his stories, just like Darren Bradley had when he met him. And he could have been in the Twin Dilemma. We want to hear it all. So help us continue to celebrate the 75th birthday of John Nathan Turner and relive the 80s gloriousness. Thank you so much for your company and your memories, everybody. I've had a really good time. It's a shame we've lost Simon there. I'm not sure what was going on with his sound. Maybe it was his new little dog there gnawing away at the Wi-Fi. That's what it could have been, Matt. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, I've got my own little dog here that nibbles at the Wi-Fi, so...
And he's a cute dog as well. He's a cute little dog.
Thanks.
Yeah.
He makes up for me.
Yes, so that does wrap it up for this time. Absolutely. We're back next week with Type 40 Live with a standard show. We'll be catching up on the news and opinions and the diary and all sorts that's going on, because it is a little quiet in Doctor Who circles at the moment. Stories are bubbling up, and from what we hear from the next couple of weeks, it's going to get interesting. But thanks to everybody who's been watching on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks as always to Starry-Eyed Girl Sarah Graham.
Thank you.
To Matt Pott there and his own companion.
My own little bezel brush.
Thank you for joining us, Shah.
Smiling.
Thank you.
And JT, thanks for dressing for the occasion. Thanks to K9 too. And of course to my mate Ian David Diaz there. It's been a long show, one of our longest actually. I think it was always going to be a long one, this one. But it's let us know what you think in the comments section. We'll be back for more Type 40 Live very, very soon. But of course, for now, happy birthday, John
Happy
Nathan
birthday,
Turner.
John.
Happy
Thanks
birthday.
for everything.
Thank you.
We'll speak to you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.